Dan? All right, call the meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, Jill.
Frank Carini.
Here.
Gerald Corniglia.
Here.
Leah Schreiber Johnson.
Here.
Amy Malat.
Here.
Mark Verhalen.
Here.
Darren Grabowski.
Here.
Dane Eichhoff. Sophia Azim.
Here.
Francine Annabon.
Here.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending our November 9th school board meeting. Right on the agenda, number 4, consent agenda, A through D. If there's any objections or questions, it will be so approved. Any questions from the board? I'm sorry, Cheryl.
Dan, all of these personnel, these additions, these are filling positions that were currently empty, like especially with all the aid department. Okay. I assume that, but I just want to verify.
Correct.
Okay.
All right, informational items, or do we need approval on that? We're good. Right, Dan? Okay. Information items, construction update, completed projects and progress report.
So I will be pulling up a slideshow from Nexus, and Brent Warren is going to be on our call. So he's going to be doing the audio version for this, and I will be running the PowerPoint.
So you've seen and met Brent before. We put him earlier in the agenda tonight because he's joining us remotely. So he's going to take it away in just a second here. So welcome, Brent.
All right. Thanks, Dan and Andy. So we have the PowerPoint with a lot of pictures here for the update for you. Some of it, last time I gave a update in person was a while ago, and when the meeting format changed, I know we've sent through a few PowerPoints with pictures, and I didn't give an update. So some of this might be a little redundant, but hopefully it's a good reminder of things we've done and the new things and new pictures and new progress that you get to see. And just everything's going really well. We did a lot of work this summer and through early this fall. I think between this summer and this fall, I think we touched 7 buildings. So lots of different things going on at lots of different buildings, lots of good progress. We finished up a few projects. So students, staff, teachers, they've gotten to start getting their hands on some of the new projects and some of the new spaces. So that's really exciting for everyone. So we'll just kind of run through here for the agenda tonight. Work that's progressing at is finished at Shepherd Hills. Work that's progressing at the high school. Work that's progressing at Carrollton, and work that's progressing at Cedar Hills. And then just a brief overview of the few things that we have coming up. We've moved through a lot of the referendum projects, so we're getting closer to the end of our work. So that's exciting to see too. So Andy, you can move forward. So starting with Shepherd Hills, just a reminder of what that parking lot space and that north end of that building looked like before we started. It was just a barren parking lot. We did the gym addition, which in some of the previous slideshows you've seen some of the pictures of the gym addition, setting the precast walls, doing the brick around the exterior of the building. Next slide, Andy, is some of the HVAC equipment and all the piping work that goes into the new addition in the buildings there. A lot of, as you guys know, a lot goes into a construction project that not everyone can see, all the pipes and the wiring and the coordination and everything. So not everyone gets to see all that behind the scenes type of stuff. Here's a shot of the inside of the gym when it was all painted out, but before the wooden floor was in. Special thanks to Mike Stile, the custodian from Edgewood. He did the painting of the logo on the wall there, so it turned out really, really awesome. Here's a shot of the contractors installing the maple wood floor, the plywood subfloor, and then the maple wood floor for the gym floor itself. Here's a finished shot of the gym with the finished sanded, stained, and polished floor, the basketball hoops, all that good stuff. So the school is in the space now. Starting at the beginning of this school year, they started occupying the gym and the bathrooms and the couple offices that are in the new addition. So it's a really great space that they've taken over. Here's a shot just of the new entrance to the gym. We got a big new sidewalk entrance there. The parking lot got reworked at Shepherd Hills. So the playground did move. The playground used to be where the gymnasium is now, and then the playground is now in the center of the parking lot. And we have a new drive loop with a new drop-off area with this entrance to the gym. So I think that's working well for the school. Really improved the safety of the parking lot there. Now getting into the remodel, which we completed this summer at Shepherd Hills. So this all is work that the next slides here for Shepherd Hills is all work that was done between June and August to prepare for the school year that started this fall. At Shepherd Hills, all of the interior walls were completely removed. Shepherd Hills had what we call demountable partitions, which are like metal walls that are kind of held together with brackets and bolts. They're not very good for sound separation between the classrooms. So those got completely removed, and we built brand new walls to separate the classrooms and the library and the office spaces. Here's some pictures of all the new studs that went in for all that. Here's a picture of some of the drywall going up with the finishing taping of the joints in the drywall. You can see the pipes and the HVAC work we did in those pictures. Here's a picture of the bathrooms that got remodeled at Shepherd Hills. That was an exciting part of the project because it wasn't actually supposed to be part of the project to start. And then when we started, we realized some of the bathrooms really needed some attention. And through the competitive bidding process that we've done on the project, Shepherd Hills did come in under budget to begin with, and we had some extra money, some extra dollars on the project that we were able to decide to go forward and refinish the bathrooms as well, which really is a market improvement on what was there for bathrooms. So we got all new wall tile in the bathrooms at Shepherd Hills. Plumbing fixtures were reset on those new walls. So it's really a great improvement that we were able to add to the project throughout the project, working with Dan and Andy and Steve Rohde, the district staff there. Just be able to add that to a project is always a great thing to do throughout a project. Here's a finished shot of the bathrooms before the ceiling was finished, but when the wall tile was finished. Classrooms at Shepherd Hills. So we got all the new walls for all the classrooms, and then also new ceilings and wall painting in all the classrooms. And then the lower level classrooms got new flooring. So here you can see a before and after of just the updated freshness and the new color scheme and the new look of the classrooms. That picture was kind of gray and kind of distorted. It looks real nice in person. We also in the classrooms got new sinks and casework for the sinks. So that was a nice upgrade. Each classroom got some of the old stuff was pretty worn through and gone through its life. Here's another shot of just more interior classrooms with the teachers' final setup in the spaces. So really brightened and freshened up all the spaces with the new LED lighting. Another part of the project here, you see the kitchen. The kitchen got new floor, walls painted, and a new ceiling. So went from an old VCT floor that was a little beat up to a new ceramic hard tile floor that's more sanitary, more cleanly, and just a really nice upgrade for the kitchen there as well. Here's some shots of the library at Shepherd Hills. We got new flooring, new ceiling, new lights, walls painted, new walls along with all the classrooms in the library. So just a nice new fresh layout for the library. Also in the library, we were able to change the layout a little bit from what the existing was, and you got new multimedia breakout spaces now in the library. This used to be just part of the library and kind of had some bookshelves that separated it off before. Now there's real walls that separate it as an actual collaborative learning space. Here's some of the breakout spaces in the library, an office, and a small group breakout space. So Shepherd Hills turned out really nice.
Sorry, Brent, I was just going to interrupt you for a moment. My favorite space that's remodeled is the former cafeteria of Shepherd Hills to what they've done, or I should say cafeteria gym, to now just being the cafeteria is probably the best space I've seen remodeled, and truly is like a night and day from what it was to where it is now. So just to add a little bit to Shepherd Hills here.
Yeah, you're right, Andy. I forgot to throw in a picture of that, but it is a great space. We added skylights in there to bring in more natural light. and new flooring, painted the walls, new cloud ceilings in there. That space really was transformative from what it used to be. Moving on to the high school. So high school is obviously one of the bigger projects, one of the more visible, more exciting projects. We have kind of multiple different phases of the high school project. We have 2 years of interior remodeling, one which was finished this summer. The second phase of the interior remodeling is coming next summer. And we also had the auto shop portion of the high school, and then we have the main auditorium and tech ed classroom portion of the high school. So you can go ahead, Andy. Kind of the first thing we had to do at the high school was pave the way for the place for the new building to go. So there was a lot of pre-work at the high school and a lot of work with the district staff and the high school staff of figuring out, okay, where this building is going to go is where traffic currently goes, is where the parking lot currently is. So we had a lot of pre-planning where the half the parking lot we built half the parking lot earlier than the project last summer, along with that soccer field, as a way to prepare for the new high school addition so we could reroute the traffic into that new parking lot. There was also a lot of storm sewer, sanitary sewer pipes that come out of that end of the building that would have been underneath the new addition, so we had to move those before we could start. So a lot of site prep went into the high school project that had to be done to pave the way for the new building. Here's some of the asphalt paving that we did to reroute the traffic to be able to be ready for when the school started this fall. Here's some pictures of the contractors working on all that storm sewer and sanitary sewer piping that I was talking about. This is a picture of the parking lot work, concrete curbs, new light poles that went in near the entrance to the football fields. Here's concrete or asphalt paving that was done. This is right outside the new auto shop. We also paved all in front of the entrance to the football field. New sidewalks all around that parking lot there on the east end of the building near the entrance to the football field. Here's a new entrance to the football field that was completed in August. That was ready for the football season here. So that's a nice new entrance point to the football stadium. Moving on to the auto shop portion of the high school. So the auto shop was an addition that is off the east end of the building. It connects to the existing auto shop and added more square footage to the east into what was the parking lot area. This is a shot of the foundations. Here's a shot of the masonry walls going up. Here's with the masonry walls finished before the brick was put on. Here's a shot just of the contractors working on the steel beams for the roof. Here's the exterior brick going up. Here's the brick when it was finished. Here's a shot of the inside space. As you can kind of see it starting to evolve with the steel roof is on. The rubber roof was finished. Some of the contractors started working on the piping on the inside. Here's so you can start to see some of the plumbing piping on the inside. Here's a good shot of the auto shop. Really had a lot of mechanical and electrical things that went into it. There's a full vehicle exhaust system. So you can kind of see in this picture, there's hose reels on the ceiling that the students can pull those hose reels down, connect them right to the exhaust of the vehicles. And that safely extracts the exhaust of the vehicle away out of the building so they can run vehicles inside of the building. There's a lot of plumbing pipes, or a lot of pipes, HVAC and plumbing pipes in the ceiling of that auto shop that took a lot of coordination to fit in there. Here's the shots of the new vehicle lifts being installed. And then here's a shot of the outside now that's completed. Turned out to be a really nice space. Here's the inside now that it's completed. This space has been turned over to the school, so they are able to use it already. I'm not sure if students have been in there yet. I believe they have, but with just the schedule of school, I'm not sure if students have been in there yet, but the teacher's got some cars in there. He's been using the lifts and getting everything prepped. So it's turned out to be a really great space that's going to be great for the students to get some hands-on learning. Moving on to the auditorium portion of the project. This again is a rendering of what it will look like once we're completed. This shot of the working on the foundations that we started earlier in June this year. Started the project really in earnest in June after we did all the site work that I was talking about. Here's some more. The concrete contractors digging the footings, working on the foundations, pouring concrete for the footings. Here's the masonry contractors working on laying the block for the new walls. It's pretty big masonry job. They probably had between 20 and 25 guys on site all summer long. Really did a great job moving along with putting the walls up really fast, which some of you probably seen when you're driving by. Here's more shots of some of the exterior brick going up. Here's where the contractor was installing the precast wall panels. So a good portion of the project is masonry walls, but also the real tallest parts where the auditorium ceiling is the highest was precast walls. So this is the crane taking those panels and tipping them up and setting those up for the construction of the walls. Here again, more shots of the contractor installing those walls. You can see the bracing that they installed to temporarily hold them while we're putting the whole puzzle together. Here's more shots. This is actually looking at this would be standing on what will be the stage, looking back out towards what will be the audience area. You can see the masonry, the contractor working on the masonry walls on the inside of there. You can start to see the darker band in there is some of the decorative block that's going to be in the inside of the auditorium. That's a good finish that lasts forever, that never has to be repainted. So it's a great thing the architect and the district decided to add to the project. That's a good maintenance-free, but still very high-end looking type of finish. It looks more expensive than it is. So it's a great burnished block is what it's called. So have some of that in the interior. Here you can see some more of that dark block that's going to be on the inside of it. Here's some concrete contractor working away on some of the footings that will end up being underneath of the raised part of the auditorium seating. Here's the orchestra pit. So in front of the stage, we will have a submerged pit for the orchestra and instrument players to go into, so the people in the audience can look over top of them and not obstruct their view of the stage at all. So that's a nice feature that'll be in the auditorium. Here's the orchestra pit now with the concrete walls finished, and you can see to the right is where the stage will be, and then to the left out of the picture is where the audience will be. Here's a shot looking now standing back where the audience would be looking at the stage. You can see the precast walls that have been set. You can see on the top there's kind of a tan band. That's the finished exposed part of the precast that'll actually be above the roof. And then the gray part of the precast is what'll be inside the building that'll eventually get covered with drywall or wood paneling or paint or what else you have for the finish on the inside of the building. You can see the opening of the stage there. Here's on the left was one, gave a tour to Miss Mongan and some of the other administration from the high school and some of the district level high school, or some of the district administration people. We gave a tour to them to see so they could see the progress about a month ago. On the right, you can see some of the steel contractor working on the steel roof for the stage. This gives you a little perspective on the size and grandeur of the project. With that, those two big forklifts are right inside the stage working, and they don't even look that big in the picture. So it's going to be a great, nice big space once it's all completed. Here's a shot of the guys pouring the concrete floor for the stage. So this is at the very back of the stage, looking out across the stage. You can see where the audience will be behind them. Here's a shot of the main lobby of the auditorium. So this is on the very south end of the project near Putes. The curved masonry walls where the lobby is an arced pattern on the back of the stage, on the back of the audience seating, I should say. Next shot is the lobby again with some of the precast creating the ceiling of that lobby. Here's standing with your back to Putes, kind of pretty close to the sidewalk. What it will look like on the front. This will be kind of the main face of the auditorium project. When you're driving down Putes, all these openings will be the windows that look into the lobby. Here's now getting into some of the tech ed classroom areas. This is closer to the existing building. The auditorium would be off to your right. The existing building would be to your left in this photo. Here's more working on the tech ed classroom areas. You can see all the electrical pipes that are going in the floor. The picture on the right is actually the metals lab, and that's where all the welding booths are going to be. So all those pipes are all the electric feeds that'll go to feed all the welders that'll eventually be in the center of this room here on the right. Here's, I think this is the Woods lab actually now with the concrete floor poured with the steel roof on. The rubber roof is on now. You can see some of the HVAC equipment is being hung. Some of the plumbing pipes are starting to be hung from the ceiling. So we got getting this space real enclosed and starting to really go gangbusters with the mechanical, electrical contractors now. Here's more shots of, I think this is maybe the construction lab maybe. You can see again, ceilings, this metal ceiling and the pipes going and contractors working on that. Now moving into the remodel portion of the high school, like I said earlier, we kind of had 2 phases for the remodel portion of the high school. Phase 1, which was done this summer, is actually the smaller of the 2 phases, but we did do a lot of good work this summer. Here's a shot of the main hallway that's just to the back of the main gym. So the main gym would be to your left in this picture. The trophy cases would be to the right in this picture, and the cafeteria is in the background. You can just barely see the doors to the cafeteria. So this hallway got new ceilings, new lights, new flooring. Here's a shot of the new flooring finished, the new ceilings in, the new LED lighting in. It's a really bright, nice space. Here's more shots of that same hallway with the flooring and lighting, and you can see the cafeteria doors there in the distance. Here's the cafeteria expansion. So we took the masonry wall that was at the west end of the cafeteria and knocked out that wall, took over just a multi-use kind of storage room that was behind it and expanded the cafeteria to the west. In this picture, you can see all the shoring posts that we had to put in to hold up the roof while we took the masonry wall down and added some steel to hold up the roof and the like of that. Here's a finished shot of the cafeteria expansion. The blue wall behind you is the new wall that's now the back of the cafeteria. That's a good 30 feet farther to the west than it used to be. Got some of the monitors up in the cafeteria and the flooring extended through into the new space. Here's a shot of the main hallway lobby right outside of the main office. The main competition gym would be to your right, and the main office would be to the left in this picture. New flooring, painted the walls in here. So just updated and freshened the look of the space. The main office we also remodeled this summer. So here's a shot of what it was before we started construction with the furniture was moved out. And you can see some of the spots in the floor, how the carpet was wore out, and it was due for an update of finishes in the main office. Here's the new desk, the new front desk. When you walk in the main office, we got the new carpet, we got the new millwork, nice new fresh look on the casework and the new design. It's much more open now when you walk in the main office. It's more inviting and more welcoming when you walk in with the 2 new desks, and took out that one wall that used to be to the left when you walked in. So really freshened up the space and opened it up a little bit. It's really nice in their main office now. Here's some shots of the library. So in the library, we got new flooring, new ceiling, new LED lighting in there, really freshened up the space in there. Here's a shot with the new carpet, the new ceiling, new linear lighting. And that's finished with the library with the furniture back in. We also did some work in the lower level athletic locker rooms, the pool, some of the locker rooms by the pool area, and then also I think what's most of you probably know is the football locker room. We did lighting in there. We did painting of the walls. We also refinished a bunch of the tile in there. So you can see on the left, the before picture of the tile where it was kind of dirty in the grout and there was a lot of patch holes from different things that have been hung on the walls over the years. And on the right is the new chemical treatment that was put on the walls. That's really a nice, clean, new look. And the middle picture is a shot of the shower room, which used to be all like the tile on the left, is all like the tile on the right. Here's just a shot of the athletic training room. Walls got painted, new LED lighting in there, just brightened up the space. Some of the bathrooms, so in the what I call the student block, kind of the square where all the classrooms are, there's bathrooms in each corner of that block. All those bathrooms got updated with the tile got refinished on those walls. The walls got painted, new ceilings, new lights, new hand washing stations. We did some ADA upgrades on the doors. There's little wing walls that kind of blocked some of the entrances. We removed some of those wing walls to create more ADA access to the bathrooms. Here's a shot. A nice thing that happened this summer was the Knights construction class. We were able to get them to come in and get a tour of the auditorium work. So our superintendent, Kyle Robers, took them around the whole auditorium project during this summer. They got to experience what a big construction site looks like. Also, part of this class is Trevor Hastings. Wanted to point out he worked with Nexus as an intern with us this summer. So he worked on the high school auditorium project all summer long, hand in hand with myself and Kyle Robers, our superintendent. So he got a good experience of what construction management really looks like during the summer here. Hopefully he's hoping to go into the trades when he graduates. So he got some good experience with some of the contractors this summer, getting to know some of them and seeing what construction is really all about. Moving on to Carrollton Elementary, we did the gym addition at Carrollton starting this spring. Some of these pictures you've seen before. I think my last update, we were just starting Carrollton. So we had to demo off a little vestibule off the end of that building. Continued on with prepping the site and digging the footings for the new gym addition, and the main office is also moving in Carrollton down to the new addition. Here's some of the concrete foundations. Here's the masonry contractor working on the block walls. Also precast walls we got for the gym walls on the Carrollton project. So here's the contractor with the big crane setting the precast walls. Here's the masons continuing on working on the office area of the new addition. Here's the gym with you can see the metal deck on the joists for the roof is on, and the bracing for the precast walls is still in there. Here's the masonry continuing on in the office area. Here's where the exterior brick was put on for the office area. Here's some shots of the HVAC equipment and the electrical equipment that goes in to run all the HVAC equipment. It's more of the back of house stuff that not everyone gets to see every day. Here's the gym with the ceiling painted, the basketball hoops in, the walls painted, the sound panels are up on the walls. Pretty much all that's left at this point was to finish the wood floor. Here's another shot of just looking the other way in the gym. Here is the office addition, shot of the workroom, the teacher workroom with the mail slots. On the right is the new conference room that's in the new addition. Here's the new front desk for the new main office that's in the new addition, gets the new secure entry. Here's the new nurses room that's in the new addition. Here's the lobby area. The gym would be just back to your right behind this picture. The bathrooms are behind you. The main entrance and the main office are in front of you. The existing school will be to the left. Here's the new rear entrance where the kids will use to come back in from recess on the playground and stuff. Here's a new main entrance. The blue area really highlights the new front door and will help people coming to the school know that's the main entrance. It'll really set that off with the new sidewalk. Here's another shot of that new entrance. Now getting into the remodel portion of Carrollton. So we did complete the remodel portion of Carrollton also this summer. Here's an existing classroom with the furniture was just removed, but you can see the old ceiling, the old lights, the old wall paint, the old floor tile. Here's with the ceilings removed, some of the walls starting to get demoed. At Carrollton, we also did ADA upgrades to the doors. So a lot of classroom doors the door got blown out, the masonry wall got blown out, widened and reworked so that each classroom now has a legal ADA entrance. Here's some more shots of the HVAC piping going in. You can see the more walls getting reworked. Here's now getting to the finishes of the remodel. So new casework. At Carrollton, they have set up where each classroom shares a little workroom between the two classrooms. So in those workrooms, we got new cabinets, new sinks, new casework. The bathrooms at Carrollton got redone as well. The kindergarten bathrooms got all new finishes with new wall tiles. Here's the main bathrooms. The main bathrooms, we kept the wall tile, but we were able to refinish them with that same chemical treatment that we did at the high school locker rooms. So again, before and after of just the new freshness of saving the money of being able to keep the tile, but you still get a good finish with a new nice brighter look to it. The Carrollton got new boiler system, new pumps. So this is the boiler room, some of the piping work that was done. Here's a corridor at Carrollton, got new flooring, new ceiling, new lights, walls painted, really freshened up the look, all new doors in all the classrooms. Here's some of the cubbies in the classrooms on the left. On the right again is the corridor. Then these are shots of some of the classrooms with the furniture back in, with the teachers all set back up. They did move in right ready in time for school to start this fall. Here's again another shot of the classroom with the new cubbies and the new doors and the walls. Again, another classroom shot. The library at Carrollton also got reworked. We got new flooring, painted the walls, new ceiling in there. Carrollton had some soffits that were really low and kind of made the small space feel smaller than it was. We tore out all those soffits and were able to raise the ceilings. And we had to redo some of the HVAC ductwork to be able to raise the ceilings, but it really opened up the space. The new windows you see in there are also an addition. Before there was no windows in there, we cut holes in the wall to add those windows. Really brightened up the space. Now moving on to Cedar Hills.
Brent, can I just interrupt you for one moment?
Yeah.
The gym at Carrollton and the office space will be ready to go. We're trying to transition into that over our winter break time. So what we would normally be off for that week or week and a half, it was originally scheduled to be movable or moved into around spring break time. And so they did a great job really speeding up the process to get what we thought our students in using a gym in a much earlier time frame. So we'll obviously be talking about that later tonight, but we had anticipated having them in around spring break, and we'll be able to get them in right after the Christmas and New Year's holiday.
So moving on to Cedar Hills. Cedar Hills, the remodel portion is coming yet this coming summer of 21, but we started working on the new gym and new office addition. Same as Carrollton, it gets the main office new addition to Cedar Hills. So here you see we're working on this fall. Here's a piping contractor doing some of the underground piping work that goes along with the new addition. Here's working on the masonry walls. More shots of the masonry walls going up for the gym and the office addition. Here's the end of the gym looking back at the existing building. Here's the contractor started working on putting up the brick. Here's the metal joist going in for the gym area. And now you can see the metal decking is on in the gym. The rubber roof is now on the gym. Here's the sprayed on air and vapor barrier, it's called, that goes between the block and the brick that keeps the water out of the building. That's all installed, waiting and now ready for the contractor to start putting the brick on. So this week, the contractor is really going to go full force on laying brick. Here's in the office area, the precast roof in the office is on, and some of the pipes are starting to be run for plumbing and HV and electric. So that's pretty much the pictures of all the work that has been done this summer. So a lot going on, as I was saying, a lot of stuff we're really proud of that really went really well. Upcoming work for summer of 21, Cedar Hills, the remodel, as I was saying, the remodel is scheduled to come up this coming summer of summer 21. The gym and the Cedar Hills gym and office addition will be completed. We'll probably be done with it this spring, but there's pipes and stuff that have to feed through the existing remodel that go into the new gym area. So that new gym and office won't be occupiable until we complete the remodel portion of the summer of 21. So both Cedar Hills will get all their new areas at the end of summer 21. And then the high school will do remodel phase 2 from summer of 21, which includes the band and orchestra areas when we're infilling the stage area in the auxiliary gym, remodeling the auxiliary gym, the science labs, the culinary labs, that all get work, and that'll all be in phase 2, summer 21. And then the high school auditorium and education center, that will be done the fall of 21. That'll kind of be really be the last project to finish up and kind of finish with the crowning jewel there at the high school. So really excited to finish up all those last projects.
We also have to touch up the existing office at Carrollton, so that's getting remodeled. Obviously, that couldn't have been done last summer, as we still needed to have an office space, so that will get done. And we're having a playable surface, exterior surface done at West Middle School. So taking that unjointed field that's behind there and making it a usable surface for both youth programs and for West Middle School to have an exterior PE space. So any questions?
Yeah, Andy, I know back when Meadowview was done, everything had gotten kind of spruced up, taken care of, with the exception of some of the bathrooms. Is that still on a whole to-do list, or?
Yep. So Steve and Brent and I have kind of a running list of items. So some of those have been prioritized. One of those was the field at West Middle School behind there.
Right.
For the cost and what we could benefit from it.
Right.
That kind of moved into the let's get it now time frame.
Okay.
Some of the other pieces, for instance, the bathrooms at Meadowview, they're still usable in their current state.
Right.
And so we're trying to prioritize things that, like, where do they fall in the rundown list, or where do they fall in the non-usable list first?
Right.
And we'll work through that. But we do have a list of priorities and are trying to fund as many of those as we can, because we have come in under bid
Right.
overall holistically on our projects.
Okay. Thank you. It looks great. Everything looks absolutely wonderful. Well, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Great.
Any other questions? All right. Hey, thanks, Brent. I appreciate you jumping on and walking us through this.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Have a
Brent.
good night.
Take care.
Next as an agenda is the tentative upcoming school board agendas.
So, board, in front of me, I have slated for November 23rd at our committee meeting. We'll talk about procedures for weather closings and delay situations. We've learned a lot in remote learning over the last few months, so this is a procedure we can touch up. So you'll hear from Mr. Krennick or Mr. Thielen and myself at that point. We'll talk state accountability measures, specifically ACT and advanced placement, and we'll have an update from Heather Ryan and the youth programs department. We'll also talk October budget, so you hear from Andy again. When we reach December, Scott Harler will join us for a fall athletics and activities review, and we'll talk middle school science and social studies with Mr. Krennick and company. We will likely also have additional information on each of these dates regarding the phases of instruction and a couple other things that come up as we approach the holidays here. So, but these are the things we know we're going to see.
Okay. All right. Next on the agenda is the public input. Recess former portion of the meetings to entertain comments or questions on agenda items. You can kindly fill out the public comment registration form. I do have a couple here. Next on the agenda is Jennifer.
Yep, you may stand on the blue line and speak whenever you want. You can give it to.
So I'm very familiar to all of the school board members. I've been at most of your meetings, if not all, speaking. And since this is being live streamed, I just want to put it on record because I was attacked very viciously for bringing my daughter's situation with mental health forward. She has my full support. She's actually watching the live stream as we speak. She has texted me constantly from the beginning of this meeting. So she has not entered the school doors. She has mental health issues. And I emailed all of you about mental health in the school system. And I got something like, well, I'm not going to mention names because I don't go there, but I spoke to a guidance counselor and the mental health has not skyrocketed. Baloney. I'm calling your bluff because I fact checked that. Mental health has skyrocketed in Oak Creek school districts, not only with the high school, the middle school, And unfortunately, it is hitting the elementary now. I want to know, with true transparency, what is this school district going to do about mental health with our kids? The longer you drag this virtual learning out, what is happening to these children? They're being left behind. I'm here to speak about mental health. A lot of parents will talk to you about numbers and education. Everything is very important. I want to know about transparency. You know what? I drove to the NGC tonight. Talk about transparency. Why are you not sending emails to all of the parents in this district where the meeting is, what time, and where it's going to be held at? Start having transparency with all of us parents. We deserve it, and the children of Oak Creek deserve this. Thank you.
Is there an order to? No.
Next on the agenda is Dr. Rohan Sylvia.
Hi, I want to thank the board for letting me talk. So personally, my uncle passed away from COVID-19, and I just want to remind everyone that it is a horrible, horrible way to die. He had struggled to breathe for hours and died all by himself in isolation. So it's very real to me. His only exposure was to his neighbor's children. Schools that are open are places where a bunch of little vectors are running around and bringing the virus home. So it is true that the odds of children suffering are pretty low, but some kids are high risk. And high school in particular is a really dangerous idea, I think. Now, I think all appreciate teachers more than ever. I want to assure you that nobody wants the kids out of the house more than a lot of parents that we know. But I don't think it's worth the risk. The risk, also what's going on is, we appreciate teachers more, and they're at risk from opening back up. You can't make a high school safe. The assumption here is that you can get hundreds of teenagers to follow simple directions, and that's extremely unrealistic, I think. So if you just take a look at the numbers are too high to open up for business as usual, because the situation is not business as usual. The risks, I think, are just too high, and we just need to wait it out a little bit more. Kids have gotten better at learning online. Teachers have gotten better at teaching online. I think it might be different for the elementary school kids, but for the older kids, we should stick it out. We should stick it out with staying at home and being safe. They can catch up, and the teachers are getting better. Thank you. Thank you for letting me speak.
Leah Mickelson Link.
Thank you. Good evening. I was here at the last meeting when you voted to return the children back to virtual learning. I spoke very much on the statistics at that time about how this virus significantly affects children at a much lower risk. They're a lot less risky. There's other things that you need to consider with the children, such as their mental health needs, as well as their social and emotional interaction. I'm not going to readdress those, you know those things, but what I want to talk to you about today is, first of all, a day in the life of virtual learning for children. I've got 2 in the district who are doing virtual right now. Today I listened to my 2nd grader spend 1 hour of his live time with papers where the teacher was simply directing him about which paper to put into which folder. That was 1 hour of his live time, and they only have a couple hours of live time in a day. Today, my 4th grader didn't have his teacher there for virtual learning, which has become a pretty routine pattern. He does not have things to do the majority of the day. And this is something that I have observed, and also when he goes to daycare, his daycare teachers has observed that as well. So I have very strong concerns about the preparedness that my kids are going to have as they move forward in this district. Because right now, the education that they're receiving is not optimal, and it's not satisfactory. In addition, today, my husband and I ran twice to this district office here because my son's computer keys didn't work. So we took the first one in, brought home the replacement. That one didn't work. I came back. I have a third one now. They didn't have the right one to give me, so I took one that he'll use tomorrow, and I'll be back here again tomorrow to get another computer. In addition to that, there are connection issues. I know Edgewood last week had a time when I think all of their teachers had an outage. My children get kicked off frequently from their virtual live sessions. I don't know, for some reason, oftentimes when my second grader is trying to answer a question, his teacher can't hear him. I can hear him answering, and the teacher can't hear him. I don't know if that's my child, if that's the teacher, or if that's the computer. But that is very frustrating for him. It's very frustrating for me. It's certainly a failure here. Another thing that I wanted to address here tonight, last session, at the last meeting, Leah made a very impassioned speech in regards to community and that this school is a part of the community. Let me tell you what I have observed about community here. The community held the fall festival shortly after the school shut down. The community is now advertising for Santa, breakfast with Santa at the community center. The community allowed children in high school to have a school dance at the community center. I am not condemning any one of those activities. Those are all special activities, but the fact that we are shutting down our schools and that is going on, tells me our community has some bad priorities here, and it's very frustrating to watch this. You know, I also want you to take a look forward in our community at what it looks like, not just today, not tomorrow, and not during the time of this virus, because we are going to get past this virus. It's real, I acknowledge that, but we will get past it. But what is our community going to look like when the children here are our adult members of this community? Because right now, they are not learning, they're not socializing, and their mental health is very poor. You need to start educating them and getting them back into normal routines, because these are the people who are going to be the members of this community going forward. Thank you.
Michelle? Is there a Michelle there? Okay.
All right, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to address you today. As you already know, my 11-year-old daughter has pre-existing conditions which make her vulnerable to COVID. After addressing the board on October 15th, I had wrongly expected that the school boards would unanimously protect our students and teachers along with the entire Oak Creek community. Instead, I witnessed a divisive display meant to pit neighbor against neighbor. Some of the board's comments from the October meeting were truly disturbing and reflected gross negligence for the safety and well-being of the people you are supposed to protect. My comments today are to respond to some members' baseless assertions. First, the burden rate. There is a substantial difference between a burden rate of 1 versus 4,000. The number is relevant, reflecting the volume of COVID in the community, which is now beyond critical levels. Our burden rate as of Friday was 1,075, just shy of tripling in 3 short weeks. The Franklin School District chose to stay open with 5-day in-person. We now have the luxury of seeing the direct consequences of their decision. They now have 935 of their students in quarantine, representing 25% of the students in their district. Robinwood, an elementary school off of Drexel here, has 41.2% of their elementary students now in quarantine. With only 62 active cases, Franklin has been unable to timely contact trace. And on Saturday, they announced that they were closing their high school due to their positivity rate now exceeding 3%. Second, the death rate. The COVID death rate in Wisconsin, if you do the math, is 0.87%, which some board members have described as low and immaterial. This district has 7,500 students and staff. This would equate to about 65 deaths on average, and an unquantifiable number of people suffering future medical conditions. When anyone, including a school district, acts negligently and demonstrates a careless disregard for public safety, there is liability to both the district and personally to individual board members. When board members make public comments at these meetings, such as, let's throw open the doors and see what happens, this reflects an attitude of gross negligence, demonstrating a clear disregard for the safety of others. At the October board meeting, you were informed of the first student-to-student infection occurring on school district property. Please let this be the first and only instance instead of the first of many. While some of you do not appear to care about public health, I'm hoping that you do care about your pocketbooks and the potential for liability. As you know, medical bills are expensive, not to mention compensatory and punitive damages. Please be responsible and protect our students and staff. Thank you.
Adam?
I came more prepared this time. I wrote my stuff down.
Just, you got 3 minutes. So,
don't worry.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, appreciate everybody's comments, and this is all good data and all good to take in. And appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight. I just have a couple of questions with regard to COVID. Discussion points more or less too. And I say all this realizing that the hospitalization rate COVID cases is like somewhere around 20% in Wisconsin today. And, that is reaching like a significant portion of hospitalizations in Wisconsin. So I understand like the context of that is where we're at today. But I just want to make these points for going forward. So I just want to know, and there was some comments about how closely we're working with the health department in Oak Creek to make decisions about the community, not just the school district. And I don't need to go further into that. The reason I ask this is because the data, is the data shows far more risk to elderly people with comorbidities or young people with comorbidities than to school-age kids, and even our teachers, who all, by the way, had the option to opt out of in-person school if they were concerned with health risks, such as your daughter, which I respect. My point is that I guess we're doing what we're doing as a community to protect the at-risk people groups while still allowing our economy and education strategy to move forward. I realize that the state and county may trump, no name dropping here, our community-based decisions, but I feel like we should have a plan and a reason behind that plan. Also, COVID-19 remains the 8th highest cause of death in the state. That's not to diminish or neglect those numbers, but my point is that we have many health issues that we are losing more people to than COVID. So why does our focus seem to solely be on COVID-19 remediation? Nationwide data shows significant increase in suicide rates, mental health issues, as some have spoken about tonight. And that's consistent with what Dane County released last month when they reported a 100% increase of suicide rates since COVID-19 occurred in this country. Where do we consider the cost benefit of staying at home, doing school, knowing that there are other things at play in kids' health? Though hard at times, I know my kids are well supported at home, but many are not. School is their support for emotional, physical, and educational well-being. Furthermore, the burden rate was mentioned as well. The Oak Creek burden rate did not seem to coincide with being in person versus virtual, nor did Franklin's for that matter, who has been in person since day one, as we all know. I guess my point is that in person didn't seem to move the needle up, nor did we move the needle back down by going virtual here in Oak Creek or statewide. What is virtual school gaining us, since it doesn't seem to suppress the infection rate, especially in comparison to a school district right next door like Franklin? 3 minutes. Thank you. I'll forward you all the graphs comparing time lapses of Oak Creek and Franklin just as a visual demonstration, but they track exactly the same. Thanks.
Any more questions to the, oh, excuse me, I got one more. Julianne.
Hello. And I do mean no disrespect to people that do have at-risk family members. Again, I would like to point out that the risk for, or the option for virtual learning was open to everyone. So I wasn't going to speak tonight, and then two things happened which changed my mind. The first thing that happened was a CDC announcement last Monday that gave permission for people with active COVID infections to go vote in person, with a mask, of course. If the CDC thinks that this was safe to do with mitigating factors, there is no reason why my high school age children cannot sit in school twice a week for in-person hybrid learning. My high school age kids who have zero COVID symptoms, there is zero reason that this could not happen with mitigating factors, knowing positive people were given permission to go out and vote. Why is this important? Why do I come here along with other groups of parents? Again, I hate public speaking. I'm shaking right now. Why do we continue to push this message forward? Because of the second thing that occurred today. I could cry. Today, my daughter and I had an in-person CAP conference with Mrs. Farnsworth, a guidance counselor at the high school. I've never met her. She was super nice, and she had really great, like she's a wealth of knowledge for kids preparing to go to college. Her second sentence today, unsolicited, literally said hi to her. Hi, how you doing? She said to me, I have no idea why she said it. She said she has done more suicide risk assessments by telephone in September than in her entire collective career as a guidance counselor. That instantly made me well up with tears. That is a problem. It is your job as a school board to create the best learning environment for our students. And as far as high schoolers are concerned, I will tell you, it is not virtual learning. Our kids are in the midst of a political situation. I have said it from day one. I can go to my first email to you in August. I felt it in my gut, in my core, and I still feel it today. COVID has become extremely political. It is real. It is dangerous. I'm sorry for people that lost lives. I am, but this is not a doable situation. If voters can go out with a mask and vote with an active COVID infection, our government said so, our kids who are asymptomatic can sit in school with a mask on. I don't even want to start an argument about what other districts are doing. We've never compared ourselves to other districts. I'll tell you what though, the other districts that were open and then now just shut down, those children are leaps and bounds ahead of the children in Oak Creek.
I don't have any more request forms. Anybody else that would like to address the board?
We do have one more.
Okay, thank you.
Whenever you're ready.
Actually, I sent my form in online this morning. I don't know if that's.
Yep.
We received it.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. Oak Creek Franklin School Board members, Superintendent Anerdel, Assistant Superintendent Katari. I would not want to be in your position. This is a challenging time to be in leadership. You are a voice. You are the people we chose to represent us. So it is important for our leadership to do exactly that and consider all those involved, the parents, the students, the staff. We need to start looking at district burden rates as well as the burdens we are putting on our families, students, and staff. Most Oak Creek Franklin School District parents wanted their children in school. That is not what was decided on our behalf. Most children just learn best with trained staff. The parents also know what they need to do. They need to go to work and make an income to support their children. But now they have to choose between a job and childcare. Unfortunate as it may sound, but elementary schools are also childcare facilities. Another unfortunate truth is that most of the facilities in the city and surrounding cities are full to capacity and cannot accept any more children. Our schools, on the other hand, are only allowing 30 students in their buildings. There are empty classrooms with no teachers in them.
empty rooms like libraries and gyms that could be used to help more families. If we are not going to open schools, we need to open up more seats in our school day camps. We could let middle school and high school be hybrid or remote and allow elementary to be open, just quarantining the classrooms that need to be contained, not an entire district. The Europeans have figured it out. They've closed everything but the essentials: hospitals, groceries, and schools. Why have we not figured this out? Do we not think there will be long-term effects on these children? Our students have lost a year of education and are trying to learn from home or daycares under pressure and without adult supervision in most cases. Staff is exhausted. The back and forth with no transparency, lack of communication, and trying to make up for what children didn't learn from missed school. The surprise board meetings and unshared information, why? Uninformed just creates confusion and anxiety. There have not been enough pat on the backs and well dones or keep it ups for them from administration or board members. The staff are exhausted just like everyone else. They may be superheroes to our kids and families, but why is leadership not encouraging, reassuring, and communicating with them? Staff are in a bind too. Staff with young children or special needs need childcare too. Why is there no notification sent to staff for camp registration and only to Aspire families? Why were staff given a weekend to find childcare? We need our staff. We cannot afford to lose more staff. We don't want them to have to choose between work and their children. We are short-staffed and possibly for some of these reasons. All right. I just want to say thank you, but please reconsider the risk.
Anybody else who'd like to address the board?
That is all for the speakers this evening.
All right, thank you, Chris. Thank you, everyone, for your comments, and appreciate your feedback. We're going to reconvene the formal portion of the meeting for board discussion or an action. Under action item, we have dashboard update, phase review, and discussion.
All right, thank you, Board President Carini. So here we are. It's November 9th, the first full week of the second quarter. Here we are. The board adopted metrics from the Milwaukee County regional health officers way back in August. It seems like an eternity ago now. We opened virtually. The health officers came back and updated their guidance, and we adopted those. Those are linked in the body of the situation report that I'm speaking off of here. And that resulted in us opening hybrid for a brief time, all too brief. Followed by the spike we're currently finding ourselves in, which, as everybody knows, we get a vote on and we went back virtual, and that's where we find ourselves today. Right? The dashboard that we started with is updated each Friday. Right now, the threshold for phase 2 is set at 350, and we currently stand at 1075, which has been noted already by others. I'm not going to spend any time discussing that very simple dashboard. That's easy to understand and linked in these documents. But this evening, the City of Oak Creek health officer is going to join us. She's on the call right now to be able to answer any questions you may have for her. Welcome, Darcy. We're glad you're here with us tonight. During those brief weeks we were open in hybrid, we learned a few things. We had some challenges and some successes. Mr. Thielen or Mr. Krennick is going to talk about those a little bit this evening too. Assistant Superintendent Kotarek is going to talk about our monitoring dashboards and explain how that process works exactly. And we will talk about some scenarios that the board may want to consider in the future at subsequent meetings, sooner or later. Some hypothetical human resources situations, some IT infrastructure situations that there have been some questions about. And we're going to talk a little bit about families and staff too. So I'll work through this methodically, and I'll ask other speakers to share throughout questions and comments, things like that. I'll ask for them as we kind of go along here, okay? Okay. So as you're all aware, our main dashboard sits where it sits. We update that each week with information from the Medical College of Wisconsin's epidemiology team. So I'm going to ask first Assistant Superintendent Kotarek to spend a little bit of time with us talking about our monitoring dashboard. And later on, I'll talk about some modifications we could make to it subsequently down the road. So Bridget, if you could talk about our local experience with that, how it's been updated as time has gone by, what we've learned, just give us a sense of your work with it, please.
Yeah, sure, my pleasure. Can you hear me now? Oh my God. Okay. No. Unmuted.
So we're going to take just a second, and IT Director Ben will join us, or we'll get the IT rolling here. So stretch your legs and take a breath, and we'll get to it in a second here.
No? Can anybody hear me? Can you hear me now? Okay. Can you hear me? Really? What about now? Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Brennan. Okay. Sorry about that. So part of our work here continues to be daily collaboration with both our building administration and extremely close collaboration with the health department. So although we are not having students in the building, we still continue to receive daily updates from the health department. And so those are coming in daily, including at least once over the weekend on Sunday evenings. And those come from one of Darcy's assistants, who is our main point person at the health department. So each day at the district office, I'm receiving daily updates from the health department. and sometimes midday updates. And that was something I noticed over the last couple of weeks when our point of contact, Emma, has emailed saying, here's your midday update. And so in that information, the health department shares with us new positive cases that they are aware of, which would include staff who are Oak Creek residents and then district students, with information regarding their dates of isolation and quarantine. Also included in those daily updates are students who have been identified by the health department as close contacts of a positive individual. So they share with us information regarding their dates of quarantine. Building principals continue to communicate with us at the district office as well, because they're receiving a lot of communication from families as well. So we have really open communication with a lot of our families who are continuing to call our school staff and their building principals when they learn of their own health situation or that of their students. So they're self-reporting it at the school level. And then oftentimes we're collaborating with the health department when we receive information to share that with them. And also our staff recently, not recently, actually throughout this whole school year, have been very open and communicative with us about their own situation. So we are also receiving timely communication from our staff, whether it be a classroom teacher, an aide, a buildings and grounds employee, a food service employee, sharing with us information about their own health. Many more staff are experiencing COVID-like symptoms, and they are responding per the protocol that we've asked them to. They're also sharing with us when their children need to quarantine or are positive, if they themselves are positive, and then we are guiding and working with them and Human Resources, Troy and Sonia, and their building principal to give staff guidance on their need to quarantine or isolate at home. So, I'd like to thank our staff for that open communication with us. I feel like they're really entrusting important information with us and trusting the guidance that we're giving them. And so throughout the day, it's this sharing of information and kind of monitoring number of active cases, number of students in quarantine, so that at any moment we know kind of what is current and accurate information among our district staff and our students.
We belabor this here for a couple of reasons. One, were we to modify this at some point down the road, right, this dashboard becomes more and more important, right? Because when I referenced earlier that we might have to do some, we're going to talk about some hypothetical human resources situations, it would build onto this dashboard. It becomes very important. And I think some may have thought that we have paused in updating this document because of our current instructional status, but it continues. Right, It continues. And you'll also notice that, if you're an avid consumer of news and you hear about other school districts making decisions about what phase of instruction they're in, they vary wildly in how many cases may lead to a pivot to 2 weeks of closure or a change. It's just different situationally. And I wanted to make sure that people had this in front of them, saw the breakdown, and I'll project it again when we talk about any changes we could potentially talk about making to it down the road based on comments various people have made over the weeks. So I just wanted to give you a sense of what that looked like even when we're in virtual learning. Okay.
And the monitoring dashboard that Andy's showing you right now is updated as of today, right before this meeting. So typically we just update that on Fridays, but given this meeting, we wanted to kind of show you an accurate picture for today. So as today, we have our highest number of student active cases. So between Sunday and today, we were notified of 7 new positive students, 3 high school, 3 elementary, and 1 middle school student. And so those numbers are for today, and then we'll update it for Friday as well.
Can I ask a question? Can you ask questions now, or do you want to wait?
So you might want me to cover the various aspects of this and we can return to things. We're not in a big hurry, right? So I just don't want to answer a number of your questions later on in the presentation and then we're all talking over each other for forever and ever. So if you just want to hold your question on this.
Absolutely.
For example, we have Darcy on the call right now, and I thought it might be helpful if she share kind of a current state of affairs, any updates that might be relevant for us. If she has any comments about contact tracing or her work with our staff, like it would be a good moment to talk about that. And like I said, I'll circle back around to this dashboard and kind of incorporate some of the ideas some of you have floated at various meetings or in conversation. So if that's okay.
Absolutely.
So Darcy, are you with us right now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, so would you like to take a minute or two and just update the board and any folks who might be watching or listening on the current state of affairs, contact tracing, things in the community, and I imagine the board will have a couple questions for you, if you would, please.
Sure. Thanks for having me tonight.
Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Yep. So as we've already heard, we are obviously seeing our busiest time with COVID that we've seen yet in the pandemic. We are currently averaging about 39 new positive cases per day. About a month ago, it was around 8 or 9 cases per day. So we've seen a serious increase over the past month. As a result of that, we have had to alter our contact tracing practices. We have had to redirect all of our resources to notifying and interviewing our positive cases, which means that we are no longer able to call and notify any contacts, anyone who's been exposed. So previously, when we spoke with a positive case, they would inform us who their contacts were, and then we would call each of those contacts to talk through quarantine, provide information, and answer questions. At this point, we are asking people who test positive to notify their own contacts because we just do not have the capacity to call those contacts any longer. So we know that people who test positive are willing and have the ability to do that with varying degrees of success. We know that this is not ideal and that this is not the best way to slow or stop the spread of disease. But in spite of having tripled our staff, we just don't have the staff to do the volume of workload that we currently have. Additionally, we have developed a prioritization of positive cases. Because we're having so many come in each day, we can't get through that large number of positive cases each day. So we are prioritizing individuals under the age of 19 and individuals ages 65 and older. We're calling those individuals who test positive first to make sure that we get the information. The reason we're focusing on the younger group is to make sure that we do have the information for any students who might be in school or any kind of sports or activities or in a child care center. We want to make sure that we know about that and that we notify them as soon as possible. Of course, including the older adults, as we know that they tend to be highest risk, and we want to make sure that we're offering the support that they might need to successfully navigate COVID. And then as time allows, we are still notifying individuals in that middle group, ages 19 to 64, but it's taking us longer to make that phone call to them, which means it's taking us longer to explain isolation and quarantine and for them to notify their contacts. And we are doing a shortened interview with those individuals as well. So we're not collecting as much data. We're not able to spend as long on the phone with them, answering questions and providing information as we had previously. We're doing as much as we can in the time that we have. Unfortunately, what that means is that within that 19 to 64 age group, we know that that is probably the large majority of parents of school-age children as well as teachers. And because we don't know which of them might be a parent or teacher, we're not able to prioritize that way. So it just means that we're getting the information later than we used to, and it's taking us longer to provide that information to the school than it used to as well. I'm happy to answer any questions, or I can stay on the line to answer questions later. Or if there's anything else you wanted me to speak to right now, I can do that as well.
Darcy, why don't we take some questions for you at this point, because we're going to go to a bunch of different topic areas. So if the board has questions for you right now, we could do that. I know you're joining us from home, and we appreciate that. So if we just want to ask any questions of her, she could drop off the call if she wanted to.
Sure. I'll start. Darcy, thanks again for all the stuff that you and your department are doing. How likely are you worried at all about cases not being reported to you? I mean, do you think that's prevalent? We hear about it, anecdotally, that people aren't calling in because they don't think their kid really has it, so they don't want to get them tested, things of that nature. Do you think or see that that's an issue?
It's hard to say. I mean, I think, we certainly get anyone who is tested, we get those lab results. But what we know from our percent positive being as high as it is that even though we're doing a lot of testing, a lot of those individuals are still testing positive, and that tells us that there are likely many more individuals in the community who are positive who are not being tested. And so, we've known that all along, that not everyone chooses to get tested, and it certainly is not a requirement, but I would expect that just given the increased number of cases in the community, there's also an increased number of untested individuals who are positive.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I got a question. Darcy, so you're saying everyone reports if they go get tested to the health department of the city of Oak Creek. So the people, I'm just going to throw this out there, Pick and Save, Target, Woodman's, Myers, the bars, the restaurants. If someone tests positive there, they report that to the city, correct? And then do you guys take any action on going to that business and saying, hey, you got to shut down, because they're dealing with thousands of people a day. And if there's one or two that are positive, they're dealing with those people. What is our city of Oak Creek Health Department doing about that?
Sure. So when someone tests positive, just so I want to make sure that I'm clear, the lab who runs the test is the one who reports the result to us, and then we make contact with the person who was tested. So as part of the interview that we do with them, we do ask them where they work, if they have any children in school or daycare, or if they participate in activities, things like that. And then we do our best to make contact with their workplace or their child's school or daycare to make sure they understand that that person should not be there, or that they need to identify close contacts and that they should quarantine. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, but you're not shutting them down. That's what I'm getting to.
No, we're not. We have not shut any businesses or places down. So I would say for the large part, workplaces are very cooperative. So if we call and say that a person who works there tested positive, it's in their best interest to identify close contacts and remove them from the workplace during the quarantine period, because they don't want to have a lot of cases there. So we haven't had many issues working with employers or any other community partners around isolation and quarantine.
Yeah, my whole point about that was if you go through the grocery line or bar or restaurant, someone has it, they pass it on to you as a customer. Obviously, most likely you don't know you got it from that person, because they're not going to trace you down because they really don't know who you are. So basically, it's just out there where you really don't know where you get it. Just good hygiene and wear your mask.
Right. I think with the level of disease in our community, it's very hard to identify where anyone is being exposed. So I think right now our recommendation would really be to assume that anytime you leave your house, you have the potential to be exposed. So we certainly want people to wear their masks and practice distancing and like you said, good hand hygiene. But there are a lot of risk right now just being outside of your home.
Darcy, I have a kind of question. I guess it is a question, but it's a little bit, I don't know, I'll just ask. So one of the gentlemen who spoke tonight mentioned, that the burden rate in Franklin is similar to the burden rate in Oak Creek at their schools. Up until Friday were, all open full time. Obviously, the number of positive cases in their district and the number of kids in quarantine in their district is considerably higher than we were. But I would have thought that their burden rate would be higher with all of their schools open 5 days face-to-face. Can you speak at all to, and I know I'm asking you to probably use your best guess to, why their burden rate as a city wouldn't have been even higher than ours with them being open 5 days a week?
Yeah, I think that's, like you said, it's really hard to answer that question. I don't know a lot about the distribution of cases in Franklin or anything really much at all. So, I think the burden rates are very similar. There's not a significant difference between them. And it's hard to say exactly, what explains that. I think, though, we have not seen, and I think other districts have found the same thing, is that, we're not seeing a lot of they may not be seeing a lot of spread between students in school settings. But again, I think the concern when the burden rate gets this high is that so many people in the community have it, that navigating who should be out on isolation and quarantine and determining that in a timely manner and making sure that you have enough staffing becomes the issue. So again, I can't speak to the distribution of Franklin cases at this point.
So would that be the same kind of answer for why we're seeing, we've been off out like almost 3 weeks or 3 weeks now virtual, and it hasn't made a difference in the burden rate of our community. And so there's some people that say, well, then since it's not making a difference, we could bring our kids back in. Would your answer that to Jane's question kind of be the same thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point, we would not recommend that anyone gather with anyone outside of their home. Okay. I think given the high number of cases. So, I would say, school is certainly bringing together gatherings of people. We don't recommend family gatherings. We don't recommend, it's just, there's a high probability of exposure with any type of gathering at this point.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you
Darcy,
very much, Darcy.
I have a quick question. It's pretty straightforward. I'm looking at the city dashboard and it's just not loading. I don't know why. So I'm assuming that it's probably the internet. But could you just remind us what the positivity rate currently is for Oak Creek?
Sure. Our current 14-day positivity rate is 18.6%.
Thank you.
I have a quick question as well. Would you consider taking like community volunteers to help you do contact tracing? Because it sounds like you're understaffed and not able to provide as much as you'd like to.
Unfortunately, we're not able to use volunteers for contact tracing, just given the sensitive and confidential nature of the work. We have had many generous people offer, but that's just not something that we're able to do.
Hey, Darcy, I got a question. This is Frank.
Sure.
So if I heard you right, you're recommending that people should not leave their homes or go outside, correct? Because of
right, we would recommend avoiding gathering with people not from your household as much as possible.
So what was your conversation with two other school districts, two other schools in Oak Creek that are wide open and in person 5 days a week?
We've made the same recommendations to all of the schools here in Oak Creek. So obviously each of them can make their own decision, and
they still remain open. Okay, right. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions for Darcy while she's on the line with us here?
Maybe one last, Darcy, on cases that come from outside, like college kids that get diagnosed and at their college, let's say Madison. Does that go under the Madison rate, or does it come under where the child resides when they're not in school?
It would be counted in the jurisdiction where the person currently lives. So if they're a student at UW-Madison, they would likely live in Madison or Dane County, and that case would be counted there.
Okay. And does that go, same thing for like hospitalization, since Oak Creek doesn't have any hospitals directly in the city limits? Do we record hospitalizations?
Right. So what we report on our dashboard is the number of Oak Creek residents who have been hospitalized at any time during the course of their COVID illness. Okay. If you look at the Milwaukee County dashboard with that indicator around hospital care, that is for all of the Milwaukee County hospitals.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Just for the board, as an FYI, Franklin's burden rate is 452.
Well, but they don't figure it the same way we do.
That's correct. They do not. So the epidemiology team that calculates the burden rates across the county, their burden rate for Franklin is 950.
Yeah.
And that's calculated the same way as ours. So that's the one that I would compare because they have the same calculation.
And there's still elementary schools open in Franklin, just 2 are shut down and 1 high school for 14 days.
Okay, I'm going to go a little bit out of order here because I think it makes sense to keep talking about the site-based dashboard and potential modifications for it at some point for the board to consider and what that would look like practically. So Andy's got that up on the big screen, and I'm going to take if you'd allow me the liberty, like I'll take the health information we've just discussed, and I'd like you to just put it on a shelf. And I'd like you to think about this dashboard from a pure human resources and staffing point of view. It might be just an intellectual activity, but I just want to talk for a moment about the practical nature of doing something like internal on this dashboard, what it would look like and feel like here in the district. So take everything we've just talked about community health, public health, set it here in your mind, and we'll talk about this for a second, what this could potentially look like.
Okay.
Does that make sense? And if I'm not making sense, you got to stop me and I'll back up. I really want people to understand what this would look like if the board started modifying these elements. Okay. All right. So I know that many of you have taken your time and looked at other districts' dashboards. Like some of them are very similar to ours, others are very different, quite granular. There's a lot of commonalities between them, but just different districts made different choices about what goes where and why. Okay. So at the end of the day, if you're going to do a site-based dashboard, so for example, if we were going to take all that we've done, set it aside and say, what do you need to be able to run? Right. And that's our scorecard. Right. So just think about that for a moment from pure staffing perspective. So you see each of our schools stacked right there. And regardless of what any given school may choose to report and monitor, right? For example, there are neighboring districts who calculate their own in-building positivity rate, right? Or districts that calculate their own daily average attendance. There's neighboring districts that say, this is our percentage of available staff, where they'll pull out anyone that's in any way been affected by COVID, and they'll hand calculate a different number, right? Or different districts will calculate whole county numbers, or they'll use their municipality. Or if you go further into northern Wisconsin, where you don't have a community health director, you have to use a whole county. Or you're even shorter staffed or less communicative with the public health authority, and you end up just using, this is my one building school district, here's the numbers we have, here's the amount of substitutes we have, here's when we're open, here's when we're not. Like, very simple, right? So I know a lot of you have taken a look at these different pieces and talked about them to me or to other people, asked a lot of questions. But if you ask me from my years in operations, when we talk about what's the staffing model we need to run, if you boil it all down, the thing that hurts us the most from a pure do we have people in front of our kids point of view are the quarantines, right? The duration of the quarantine is very long, right? And often we have to get quite creative to be able to cover that quarantine, whether we're in session or not. So those 3 weeks we were in hybrid, we did a bunch of creative things. Like you might have seen on TV, a neighboring district was highlighted for teachers teaching from their home. Maybe some of you saw this on channel 6 or 12 or something. Well, we've been doing that for quite a while too, right? So if a teacher's quarantined and they're able to instruct, they may very well instruct from their home, and we'll have a different supervisory model in that classroom, right? But you still need someone who's certified or someone who's one of our employees who we can move over into that room to cover that space. So it gets to be a human resources shell game, which makes it difficult to apply an exact percentage to each of our buildings throughout the district, because we can do a lot of creative things. Like, for example, reassign aides from throughout the district or reassign central office folks. What we've also done is use our leadership teams at each building or our people services teams. And while none of that is ideal, it's what the lengths this district has gone to be able to cover classes and to continue to provide instruction without the safety and mitigation pieces beginning to break down. Okay, because that's the distinction. Like when you see a neighboring district announce that they had to close XYZ elementary school for X number of days, it's you no longer have the staffing that can endure to maintain your mitigation practices. Because in different years, when we would be unable to fill a sub, right, we might do something different, like combine a class for a day or a section, so we could keep things rolling. But that's not an option available to us in COVID era, because the thing we want to ultimately do is avoid having to quarantine large swaths of students, right? So you have to keep them cohorted. This is an elementary example right now. It's really different when the kids get older and you're in an 8-period day and you're place to place to place, potentially around 100 or 200 kids in a given day. So to take one quick step back here, some districts might use the contact tracing turnaround time. Like you'll see that on some of the neighbors districts. That's a valid measurement, because you need to know the success of your contact tracing. So you know, like, how many kids are going to end up quarantined and how much longer we can endure in a successful environment where our mitigation practices aren't breaking down. So one thing we may add to this dashboard right here is, are we able to effectively contact trace in a short period of time? Right. And you could show that in a green light, red light model. So that might be something I suggest at some point down the road we add to this document. That's one. Another one would be those HR target staffing numbers at each site, which, if you chose to modify this at some point down the road, you'd have to give the district some level of operational authority over, because you can't just say all elementary schools must be running at 95% and all middle schools must be running at 95% staffing, because we can transfer people around, right? So you'd put things in place, but we would ultimately have to be able to continue to run while maintaining mitigation standards. So if you take one of our elementary schools, for example, if we're running 5% down, that's a problem. If we're 10% down, it's a major problem. And if we're 15% down as a general rule, that would mean that everything's breaking down. So if you're at an elementary school and we have 5 unfilled positions, just as a general rule, that's going to make it really hard to maintain standards for safety. And that's what you'd see in neighboring areas where, okay, we have to close X school for 14 days. Right, that's what this would functionally become. It would become a human resources dashboard where each elementary school, we'd be measuring how many staff members could we be out, how many middle school staff members could we be out, how many high school staff members could we be out. And those numbers would go up at each site, but as a general percentage, it would hold roughly firm. But we wouldn't have an exact cut line. Like, for example, right now, 350 burden rate is an exact cut line. Is that making sense? Because we'd be able to transfer some personnel, right? We'd be able to be creative, but at some point with the number of quarantines or positive cases, right, you're going to reach a measure where you can't maintain safety anymore. And that's what you see in other places that have site-based measures.
Would that be dependent upon the size of the building? Like, Shepherd Hills is our largest elementary school. So would it be a percentage?
So Shepherd likely has a break-even point that's higher than one of the smaller schools, right? Just from a pure human resources point of view. Just like East would be able to be
West,
down more numbers than West, because it's a much larger facility. High school, there's 122 or so teachers at that building any given day, right? And what happens at the high school, which becomes very problematic, is we're short subs almost all the time in that building, even in good years. And most substitutes, or the most frequently occurring substitutes you're going to find is a retired teacher. Right. So that further draws down that pool. So what happens at the high school is teachers cover other classes, right, internally, which adds a vector of potential additional quarantines, which is what we began to see, which meant the high school, in very short order, had a great deal more folks on quarantine than you'd find at an elementary school where the cohorts are much tighter. Right. So it gets more problematic as the kids have increasing contact with one another as they get older. Right. Nothing we haven't seen play out in neighboring communities. So like I said, there's the disease portion of this, which Darcy spoke to a few minutes ago. And then there's the brass tacks of human resources coverage that most of these monitoring dashboards that you see in neighboring districts, it speaks to that element, right? So neighboring districts that I'll talk to, they'll say, well, we took program support and pupil services and a whole bunch of folks who are out of district or that work in the front office in places, or aides who have certification, and they use them to cover teachers' classes, right? That's the patchwork that we did when we were hybrid. That's the patchwork we do now. And that's the patchwork you find throughout the state and the country right now. So were you to at some point direct administration to do site-based dashboards, that's where the rubber meets the road. Like, when do you no longer have enough staff to maintain standards? And that's going to vary a little bit site to site. And the board would have to be comfortable with us making some internal decisions about that. And assigning durations of closures to different classes and different schools if we were ever at that point. So hypothetically, you could have 4 of your elementary schools running and 3 of them closed for varying durations of time, right? And that's what you see in other places around the state who have site-based dashboards. Often they'll have breakpoints where it'll trip the whole district, right? And some of our neighbors haven't met those yet, and hopefully they don't. Right? But that's what it would look like functionally. We'd find ourselves in a situation where this dashboard you're looking at here grows a little bit, right, in categories that we're looking at. But what we'd be doing is creative solutions to continue to remain open, right? Now, is the likelihood that this will deteriorate quickly when there's a great deal of disease in the community higher? Well, I mean, you don't need a statistician to talk about that. It's just like anything else in our community. If it's outside, it comes in and we work through it in our schools, right? So at a time when there's a lot of COVID circulating, is the likelihood that we're going to be able to open and endure for a long period of time higher or lower? Right now, I'm not a statistician, but you can answer that for yourselves, right? So there are more ideal and less ideal times to walk down that road. Those are decisions that the board makes, and we do our best to carry out. So that's kind of how this meets what you've seen in other places. And those are the modifications we'd ultimately look to make. You'd make some staffing-based categorical decisions that would complement this existing document. So you all know back when we exceeded 350 and the board voted to close the district and transition back to phase 1, a couple of our elementary schools were doing better than some of our other sites, right? High school, middle schools, and Power, they were in a different place than a couple of our elementary schools, right? So if you were in a place where you were doing site-based dashboards, like I said before, you'd have some that continued to open and operate, all kind of on different calendars. And that's logistically very challenging, but others have found ways to do that. And the people around here, if that was the direction of the board, would work their tails off to make that work as long as they could, as best they could. But you'd have to understand that we'd be making decisions operationally, if that makes sense. Okay, so
obviously,
I bounced around quite a bit, but if you have questions on those changes, it's a great time.
Yeah, I was going to say, obviously then at an elementary school where we have cohorted students, if a student tests positive, there's a likelihood that there's just one teacher that they may have come in contact with. Whereas in the high school, if a student tests positive, you could have 7 teachers that have come in contact with that individual. So from an ease of staffing, chances are it's easier at the elementary school than it is at the middle or the high school.
It certainly grows much more complicated at the higher levels, right? Just think back to your kid's experience or your own. It's a real different day, you know, so it's a real different day.
Okay.
I think I hit all the points on that. So if at some point the board was interested in seeing a further fleshed out site-based dashboard, those are some of the elements you'd see. Like I would recommend duration of contact tracing in the community. That's something we'd get from Darcy. So how many days is it taking to contact trace? And then we'd also have like a relative range of staffing requirements that we'd need to be able to choose to act on here in district, if that's something you did at some point down the road. Amy, were you raising your hand?
I was. Didn't we hear though right now that Darcy's not doing the contact tracing?
You did hear her explain like how challenging contact tracing is right now. So for example, if there was like a color-coded band on here, like a traffic stoplight, right? We wouldn't be in the green is good category for contact tracing just because of how heavy things are right now. But that doesn't mean it's going to be this way forever, right? We don't know if we're through this spike or if we're starting to turn a corner here. We just have to keep our eye on it closely. But I would recommend if the board were to make some site-based changes, contact tracing matters. So that'd be something we looked at. You see that on a lot of districts that have site-based dashboards.
When we were open and in person, were we doing our own internal contact tracing?
Bridget, could you elaborate for Amy on what exactly like our staff contributes to the contact tracing puzzle?
Yes, pretty much when we would learn of a positive student, either from like a parent notification, sometimes older students are self-disclosing to coaches or advisors, or if we learn of it from the health department, at that time, we were doing all of the contact tracing for the school contacts. And so the health department would say, please complete contact tracing for anyone who had contact with the student, and they would give us the date range or the single date depending on the onset of symptoms. And then our principals primarily, and at the high school also including Scott Holler, were conducting that contact tracing themselves. So talking to teachers, asking teachers to think about, look at your seating chart, who would you identify of having been 15 or more minutes within 6 feet of the student, including yourself. The principals and athletics directors are interviewing students, talking to them about passing time, lunches, athletic buses, club times. And so they were conducting that process internally to determine, here's the list of close contacts. And then once those students were identified, calling the students to the main office at the high school and calling their families, making sure to make voice-to-voice contact with those families. And then we would work together, and I would support them in sending out the follow-up written communication. And the same thing was happening at the elementary schools. They were still making sure they talked to the classroom teacher, making a determination together with staff if it was an entire elementary school or classroom or some students who had a quarantine, double checking with daycares, other times in the student's day, who are those contact tracers. I would say, especially at the high school level, it was pretty much consuming most of the work Candace Mongan, our high school principal, was doing for several weeks. And I appreciated that she wanted to ensure that was done correctly, but I do know that was pretty much all the work that Candace was doing, and then trying to, I know, fit in some of her classroom observations of staff. But I assume that that's what would happen. At whatever point we return to in-person, that we would assume that heavy burden again, just because the health department does not have the capacity to do that. And I assume it would be just as much time, if not more.
I was gonna say, it'd have to be more.
Because that was when it was
Yeah.
at 4:30 and lower. So yeah, so that was a job that we'd figure out, and our office staff were helpful as well.
Well, now I know why our quarantine numbers are so low, because the city's not able to keep up with it, right?
Well,
So-
and you have to remember too, Amy, that not being in session changes the number of individuals anyone like anybody's going to bump into, right? So we're home right now. It's a whole different ball game if you're in session. I know you've seen some pretty staggering quarantine numbers from some schools around Wisconsin. You can see like how that happens really quickly. Like Darcy gave an example of like a business to Darren's question earlier in the meeting. In the same way, like a local business would hop to and try to coordinate this so that you could tie it off as quick as you could so you could keep running your business. That's been the experience of our kind of extended leadership teams at our sites, if that makes sense.
Just for reference, 3 weeks ago, which was approximately our last full week, we had 249 students in quarantine versus the 133 that was done as of this afternoon.
So to kind of tie a bow on this portion of the conversation, like if you're able to backfill behind staffing quarantines, it makes a big difference, right? So if our subfill rate is high, that's very valuable to us. Subfill rates this year have hovered around 50%, right? So we end up doing a lot of internal covering, which adds up quickly when people end up in quarantine. So that's the principal issue confronting us from a human resources point of view. It's you just end up with a lot of people in quarantine when there's a lot of COVID in the community. And that's kind of how things kind of begin to break down.
And
Dan, can I ask?
And what's the I mean, I know we're not in school right now, but what's the sub shortage rate? Like, I mean, how is teachers on call? I mean, the last time we met, they were like 50%. They could meet 50%.
Beyond sharing that we're around 50%. That's the best I can do for you for tonight.
Okay.
So that's kind of been the historical, like, what's the COVID era year been like? Troy question, 50%. So,
I mean, could you would one safely assume that since the burden rate within the city is higher, that more than likely it's causing even more people to come out of the sub pool and say, I'm not gonna chance it anymore, because they may be sick, or they may be,
I think it's hard to say, like, I don't know how people make their decisions, like you've heard Troy come in here and talk about how we're creative at trying to attract subs.
Right.
I think that 50% number as a general point of discussion is one you could hold in your head. But at the end of the day, if the board put a site-based dashboard in place, that factor would matter, but ultimately, like, what actually was happening would be the key, right? Like, the better our sub rates, the longer we could backfill behind quarantines, the longer we could potentially run, right? But at some point, when things get too heavy, when that percentage is too high, like, that's when you'd end up in a situation where X elementary school is closed for 14 days. So, okay.
Hey, Dan, real quick, I was just curious, with the Inspire program, are any of those kids' numbers on this dashboard that we're looking at?
Yeah, but
and the quarantines.
Yes, they're in there, but I broke it out too because I thought you might ask. So we've got 17 students out right now who are in some form of isolation or quarantine. I got this number from Heather today. 7 staff, and there's 295 students registered, and there's 63 aides participating. So 17 kids out, 7 staff out.
Okay, so you're not just having everyone else self-isolate for 14 days then, because you're in contact with that child that was at the daycare.
Yeah, and what happens is, like, for example, like if the quarantine is, sometimes we don't find out because they're so behind with contact tracing that someone's period of isolation or quarantine might be nearly up by the time we get notified too.
Wow,
so
okay.
not all 17 of those represent 14 days out.
All right, thanks.
Bridget, did I say that right? Did I muddy over that one, or is that accurate?
No, that's accurate. The more behind the health department falls, yeah, we'll get that information later. And then sometimes kids are only quarantining. They have like 3 days less in their period of quarantine. And I think Darcy would say that that's contributing to the community spread, is that the longer it takes to notify somebody that they've had close contact, the longer they're in daycares, at the basketball practice, potentially spreading the disease. And so that's that snowball effect that happens the farther they get behind, the later any of us find out of our risk.
So those are some of the key pieces that you'd find if at some point we're looking at site-based dashboards. Sorry, you had another question.
Yeah, and I don't know if you can answer this without putting more time into what a site-based dashboard would look like, but knowing that we do have teachers now who are either positive or on quarantine, even though we're not in school because they've been in contact with someone somewhere else, do you have any idea in regards to of the schools we have right now where they would be from we've got appropriate staff to maintain versus not?
So just looking at this document that's displayed in front of you, like, this tells a pretty straightforward story. You see reportable, you see Forest Ridge right there, like, struggling. Those jump out because when we have over 5, it appears on the dashboard. So and like Bridget said before, this is up to date right now. So 21 district wide, but Forest Ridge in particular would be in a tough spot today if hypothetically we were in a spot where we had a site-based dashboard right now.
And Bridget, kind of a related question. So you feel like even if parents are not calling right now to say, I have a child who tested positive or is in quarantine, you're hearing that information from the health department? Because I do know that there were people saying, well, the kids aren't in school, so I don't feel like I need to notify school. Do you feel like you're still getting that data?
Some parents report it as soon as they get the lab results, but if they take their child to get tested, as Darcy noted earlier in our discussion, the lab that completes the test will send Oak Creek Health Department the results. So whether or not a parent shares that information with us ahead of time, which we greatly appreciate when they do, because they receive that information before the health department, we'll certainly later that day or in a couple of days get that information from the health department. And I think we are getting it more quickly from the health department because, as Darcy shared, they have prioritized positive cases for individuals 19 and under. Or if we hear something from families, certainly I contact them saying, hey, can you have this name on your radar and help give us some guidance as far as dates of quarantine and isolation.
And Bridget, do we have, other than the one that was mentioned at the last meeting, have there been any other cases that have been, between staff members or between staff and students that they've obtained a positive result?
When we were in session, I think there was a couple of cases of spread. Right now, we're primarily seeing it within households. So, one positive individual in a household, and then sometimes we receive subsequent information from the health department saying, well, now this child who was just quarantining in the home is now positive. So those are the most complicated situations, and those are the situations in which either now or when we return, children are out of school longer because if their parent is positive, the parent can't completely isolate from the child. So the child is riding out the 10-day isolation with the positive parent or sibling, and then on day 11, starting their 14-day quarantine. So now it's in-family spread, but we were seeing what Darcy thought was some spread individual to individual when we were in school, and we saw that among a staff situation and then a student situation.
Okay. Thank you.
So just based on some of our prior discussions here, our team has talked about a variety of different hypotheticals and what we would do if the board changed position or recommendations evolved, things of that nature. So I'll segue to something else here. So we've kind of outlined the challenge that quarantine presents, right? And you've heard stories about kids here or elsewhere who have entered quarantine or places where they've entered quarantine multiple times. So you get a kid who's home, you have the students' classmates in session, right? So what's the solution for that? And I know a number of you have either personal or indirect exposure to this. Like if a kid, while we were open, had to be quarantined at home, we'd use our IT infrastructure to turn on an iPad, and we'd stream the live instruction from home or from the classroom to the home. Right. So one of the discussions we've had with IT is, what if we had to do that on a much wider scale? What if we were open and there were sporadic quarantines spread across perhaps all of our elementary schools or even all of our schools at once? Right. So we have to be able to be prepared for that scenario, because I think until there's a vaccine, we got some good news today on that front, but it's probably quite a ways before it's widely available. So odds are we're wrestling with this for quite a while, right? So if your student hasn't been quarantined yet, if we're back in session, it's a foreseeable event that we're going to have plenty of kids in quarantine before this is all done. Right. So we're at a place where we're able to scale our IT infrastructure throughout the district to be able to support a lot of kids on quarantine at once. So I just thought it's important to be able to say that so all of us understand it together. Like we have enough iPads for virtually every classroom in the district to be able to stream instruction if we had a bunch of students at home and a bunch of students in session. So that's another contingency we've prepared for as well as a district. That's very challenging to support, but it's our challenge to be able to do that work. Just like Bridget was talking about the lift that is incumbent upon all of our team to coordinate this stuff. Like it's not without challenge, but we're always creatively problem solving, just like the rest of you are, to try to figure out how to solve as many problems as we possibly can. I mean, every day it feels kind of like Apollo 13 and you're making the carbon dioxide filter to fit the square hole, and you've just got a bunch of round pegs, but that's the people you have working for you in this district, So when Bridget joined us, I don't think that she knew her primary job would become COVID coordinator, or when Mrs. Mongan agreed to be our high school principal, that she'd spend most of her day facilitating contact tracing, or when Scott Holler signed up to be the AD, that would become his life. But that's where we find ourselves, and there's no use complaining when there's a job to do, right? So that's what it looks like. So
Dan,
oh, sorry, Frank, go ahead.
So you're talking about that iPad use, is that just on the elementary level, are you talking about?
So we have it at saturation throughout the district.
So Dan, so say, because I know we put this out before, and there are kids doing virtual learning right now, besides going to school for the 2 weeks that they did, or the hybrid. So if a parent now, if we hypothetically open, could they just keep their child at home with the iPad and bounce from class to class?
So Darren, one thing that we had to anticipate is the last time the board talked about this, it was a split vote on what to do, right? So it would be negligent of me and my team not to plan for changes, modifications, reversals, right? So we have to be ready for whatever might happen, okay? So when I ask IT, what if we're in a dramatically different situation and we had to change course? And perhaps the board does that before the burden numbers completely recede to where we told the community we would wait to reopen in prior votes, right? What do we do? How are we going to support people? Because obviously there'd be a lot of upset folks if the board changed direction and now they have to adapt to something very new. Right? You'd have plenty of people who are happy, but you'd have plenty of people who are upset. As you can see based on the emails you receive or the comments we get, there's great division amongst perspective. I mean, if I pick up my phone, I could get yelled at by one person, hang up, pick it up again, and get yelled at for the exact opposite issues in any given day. And all of you have had that exact experience. Like, I think if we were all trying to give an individual exactly what was best for them and their family and what they needed, we could do it, because that's what we do every day around here, right? But when you're trying to meet the unique needs of 6,500 kids, right, the needs are myriad, right? So, okay, back to the original question. If we anticipate a moment where there's a bunch of folks who are like, this is not what I signed up for, like, I want to stay home until things get better, right? It's my job to make sure our team can support whatever choices are made in here, right? So we said, what do we do for those people? Well, we'd have to be able to coordinate education for them, just like we learned how to do when kids were on quarantine, right? So that's very hard, but the team has to be able to do that if all of you change the position of the board, and we have to support that decision. Does that make sense?
Yep, exactly. Thank you.
Okay.
I have one question. I know one of the speakers today commented about some concerns about connectivity and some problems with, devices. How frequent is this happening, and what's the likelihood if we did, all the people staying home with iPads, is that going to increase? I mean,
So I'm not going to lie to you, Cheryl. Tech problems are everywhere, right? Like, we have no ability to control, other than supplying people directly with Wi-Fi hotspots. Like, we don't know what connectivity looks like in the home, right? Devices break and break down, right? You know how it works here. We try to stretch everything as long as we can, so we don't unnecessarily expend funds on something we might be able to get another year or two out of. So there's going to be tech problems, and there are tech problems right now, right? So that tech center that the folks who participated in public comment this evening are sitting in right now, that's a busy room every day that it's open in this district. And whether it's the operations secretary, the techs, or Director Bennett himself, they're answering phone calls all day, every day. Right. So clear-eyed, like, if the board makes a change that requires greater tech infrastructure, it is absolutely foreseeable that there will be strains on the system. Like, you just have to be realistic about that. Like, our team will do the absolute best they can. It'll be like the earliest days of the pandemic when we're using the tech vans to deliver food and Chromebooks to people's homes throughout the district, right? We'll treat it like a barn raising, but it is not going to be without problem.
Okay.
So, all of these different pieces, right, depend on the availability of staff. Right, you can't underestimate that element, right? We have to have staff healthy. We have to have staff available, right? And often through no fault of their own, they're ending up in quarantine. Or you heard Darcy talk about it when Darren asked the question about businesses. Like you're in line at the grocery store, you're anywhere. There's just a lot of COVID floating around right now. I mean, my iPhone update last night asked me if I wanted to be notified if my phone got close to somebody who tested positive for COVID. Anyone else seen this? Like this is the world we're living in right now, right? And I mean, like, it's not going to be easy, but none of this stuff works without our staff. We've had staff throughout this building that you're sitting in right now that have been affected by COVID. That's just going to continue, right? And it's whatever we do, there's going to be hiccups here. I just think it's important to recognize how creative the people in this room have been, like how solution based the board has been, like how invested you all have been, right? I've heard stories from you as like having to support your grandkids and your kids as instructors and how challenging it's been, right? It's been a lot. But we have to be able to keep people free of quarantine and COVID itself if we expect these things to continue to work. Right. We asked our staff to be virtual instructors this year. I don't know. Some of you know the story. Like I was a biomedical science major and I was tutoring little kids in reading. And that's what made me change the career trajectory of my life and decide to become an English teacher. Right. But I signed up for knee to knee with kids who needed to learn how to read. Right. That's why I chose to do this for a living. Right. And it's no use in complaining when there's a job to do. Right. And it doesn't do any good to admire the problem. But the fact remains, we've asked our staff to learn some very challenging things in a very short period of time. And, you know, they're Oak Creek Knights. They did what we asked them to do. They worked their tails off. We built a plan. But all of this depends on people staying healthy. So there's that. And there's one other point I wanted to make before questions and other pieces. Okay. Go ahead, Cheryl. Sorry.
Two more questions. One, how does like the staffing matrix here, how does that affect like the staff that travel between buildings? Our OT, our physical therapists, you know, some of the people that go to different places, how are they like either counted in here? And then also how is district office? You know, should we have a line item for like district office or traveling staff so that we have a clear picture of where it's being affected?
So there's plenty of folks who travel, including all of us at district, who bounce around quite a bit. We've tried to limit that as much as humanly possible because the more traveling you have, the more vectors you have for transmission. But you'd see like, okay, so tomorrow, like I have to quarantine for 2 weeks, you'd see me represented on the district line. And we haven't gotten much more we haven't gotten much more granular than that because we have limited groups of people working in different departments, so district kind of subsumes them. But we've been following all the rules that everybody else has to follow. When the health department says you got to quarantine, we do. So
well, I guess I was looking at if we had a separate line item for them, it would help us like see maybe, you know, like, okay, if we've got, you know, X number of people out of district office and those are the people that we've been like sending out to sub in places, that really soaks up any resources that we have. It
would be hard to code it that way. But when I said before, you'd have to give us some operational authority to make those choices. Like if Bridget, myself, and Director Hamblin were looking at the scorecard here, and it's like, all right, we've got everybody we can deployed. We're stretched as far as we can stretch. One more case that we can't fill means that we can't maintain standards anymore. There it goes. You know, so there's going to be some operational choices that we'll have to make, which you've empowered us to make on a variety of other issues over the years. Team's highly capable of doing that. So I'll say one more thing before we kind of transition out of this and do some more Q&A. I take a lot of calls here at District, and it doesn't get any easier as the years go by. You know, I had a mother call me a couple of days ago, and this one hit pretty hard. She'd had a medical procedure done, right? She has 2 young kids in our district, and she said, "Share the story." I said, "Okay, well." Her mom is older, right, and was doing her very best to watch the kids, but isn't super tech savvy, and it turned into like a really emotional, overwhelming, challenging experience for everybody involved. And the mom said how much she appreciates the safe and structured place that we provide with limited instruction, and how it's so valuable and how they need it so much in their family. And all I could do was listen, right? And I know a lot of you have had that experience too in your own homes, and you want to do everything you can to help people. And I said, ma'am, we're going to keep working as hard as we can to try to figure this out. And we don't have a state or a federal playbook, but that's not an excuse. We have to figure out what we can do with our own two hands right here in front of us. And we have to remember that not all of our kids have someone at home all the time who can provide direct knee-to-knee support. I've spent enough time working with kids in really challenging circumstances to know firsthand what a lot of their experiences are. And I think about them every time we have one of these meetings and we have to make choices that affect 6,500 kids. And when I send an email, that email goes to roughly 13,000 people who are listed as parent or guardian, right? So you've got 20,000 people or so affected by some of the choices we make. And the gravity of that is that behind every one of those email addresses that our updates go to is a mom like this, or a dad like the fellow who came in and spoke to us about the risks inherent in the choices you're all making. And the only reason I bring this up is, it's like so many other things, right? You just look at everything in front of you and you try to do the best you can. And I know that that's what all of you are trying to do as a team here together. And that's what I ask of every teacher who works in this district, and every support staff member and delivery driver and custodian, and every person that calls himself a knight. So it doesn't get any easier, but I applaud the hard work that everybody's been doing, the commitment of our staff, the dedication of the board. And I think of that mom every time we try to come up with a new creative solution, or any number of the other parents who have called me as these weeks and months have slipped by and the days have blended one into the next. So I just wanted to close with that point. So metrics, tech, challenges, all kinds of stuff, but I'll answer any questions, or the full team's here to answer any questions too. So
I'd like to pick up from there. Because one of the things I wanted to talk about, I think, dovetails nicely with your last statement, which is about providing support and intervention for any students or families that are particularly struggling. So I know we've definitely received some messages from families that, virtual is just not working out for them, and it breaks my heart. And I want to know, what are we doing, for them, and how can we help them while we work through larger scale solutions. And I was talking to a teacher in another district about their something that they're building in their district that sounded really interesting to me, which is like creating this idea of intervention teams for targeting students, and this is particularly at a middle and high school level, but that seems extra important as an age group right now, since it's become clear that it's going to be a little more difficult to safely get them back 5 days more quickly. So I wondered if there's already something like that happening, and if we could talk through what support services are available, or what do teachers have the freedom to do in terms of bringing kids into the building, maybe that for specific support, and then how can we build on that if we find ourselves in a position where virtual for those upper age levels continues longer than anybody would like.
I'm going to ask Assistant Superintendent Katark to give us just a general overview of some of the stuff that's available. And I would recommend we revisit this topic at a little more depth at a subsequent board meeting, just because of its critical importance, in particular, like how we could continue to share out some of this stuff and make our resources more and more visible to families who are struggling right now. So two-part answer, but I'm going to ask Bridget to weigh in here right away.
Yeah, that's my pleasure. Thanks for bringing up that question, Leah. So I want to continue to applaud our staff, because amidst some of their own trepidation about, thank you. So in spite of some of our staff's own trepidation about working at this time with a high burden rate, they are still keeping students at the forefront of their concern. And so at the building level, student intervention teams are still continuing to meet and look at data such as attendance. So virtually, are they logging on? Are they engaging in the classes? Are they making progress? And so they're still looking at all that information as they would if we were in person. And at the building level, they're working together with counselors and social workers. I hear of staff going out and making home visits to check in on students who haven't engaged in learning. I know at the high school, they're using some of their student data regarding engagement and progress to work one-on-one with a few students. So at the high school, they're working with some of our most at-risk students who are not making progress toward earning credits. We've had recent conversations at the middle level about more closely reaching out to our students who are English language learners to see how we can connect them more closely to their EL teachers and school staff. And so our staff are recognizing that this, for many students, is a challenging educational model. And so they're working together as a team to see how can we continue to reach out and make human connection with them, first of all, because many of them have great relationships with kids, and that reconnecting some of those staff with students is helping kind of keep those students move along. So that's kind of a big picture summary of some things that we see and hear is happening. And so the staff are really kind of going out of their way, recognizing that it's, challenge to bring a lot of people together, but how can we still connect with some of those kids and families who are struggling the most.
I echo Leah's comments. That was actually something I had written down as well. And I like the idea of it almost being a standing item here. We know, as of tomorrow, we're not going to have every student back in school 5 days a week. And obviously we want to work towards something like that, but what are we doing and what additionally can we do to support the families? I applaud the parents, that spoke tonight about their own experiences with their children, the open communication they've had about the struggles that they've had. It's real. It is. Mm-hmm. And as Dan, like you said, we're trying to weigh 12 different things that we all feel are important and trying to decide, what weight to give what. Obviously mental health, social and emotional well-being is really important. And I think we need to highlight for families what's available if people, are not aware, and we need to look at what additionally we can also do for additional services, changes to structure, whatever it might be, to continue to support.
No, so we're back here the 23rd, right? So we'll belabor that point in a little bit more detail, regardless of what's on our agenda. So.
Right. And I know I had the opportunity on Friday to sit in with the high school on a Zoom meeting regarding social emotional learning and what they're doing. It was an amazing in-service that they did and talked about some of the concerns they had regarding suicides and things of that nature, and what they're doing and how they're helping teachers to kind of watch for signs and symptoms and what they can do. There's some excellent information that was a part of that I've talked with one of the guidance counselors about, seeing if we can get that information out more into parents' hands. And this was specifically looking at high school, but I know it's an issue that we need to look at our middle school and our elementary as well. So at least we can give some parents some more tools to watch for if their kids are having specific issues. Again, encouraging them to call their counselors and things of that nature, or seek out some of the resources. But it's hard because the resources that are available out in the general public are a horrible waiting lists, and it's only growing because of this. So, but it was a very good in-service. I was really, really nice.
Obviously, that's really important to the high school, middle school, and elementary, but we also got to present it to the special ed. It's what they're going to too. So there's strong emotional and social issues there that parents can could utilize in having those conversations. So, any other questions, comments?
I guess more just of a statement, hearing that there is capacity to technology to start looking at, what we would do at a school level to allow people to look at having kids in school or continue to stream from home. Obviously, it's a bigger conversation than, what we've just had. Looking at how you quarantine school-based dashboards. I want to continue to have that conversation as possibilities to get kids back in school. And I want to continue to also look at, if those are our opportunities and we're able to give families more choice, what we put in place to support our teachers as well. And they were given choices at one point and made decisions based on, some choices we made, how we can move forward with some of those strategies and possibly still support the teachers as well.
Any other comments?
I've got a few. I guess the conversation's been going around at the table here on all different issues, but I guess the best way I can think of myself to move forward, and I guess I'd like to first make an opening statement that if nothing else we do here, everyone's got to keep in mind this one thing. If nothing is ever tried, no progress will ever be made. So we can sit here and talk about things all night long, but we have to be willing to try some stuff to move the ball forward. And until we get to that point, talk is cheap, but it's got to be followed up with solid action. And first, I guess in the general part of it, we have to decide which numbers we're going to pay more attention to versus other numbers that are out there. So I kind of jotted down three things. We've got the county numbers, city numbers, and our school numbers, and how much they should weigh individually into what decision we make when putting the kids back in school. And I guess everyone can look at it a little bit different, but I kind of thought that the school numbers themselves should be at 50% of our decision making, because they deal with the students and our teachers, of course. But when you look at the city numbers, looks at the whole city as a total population, no matter what age group you are or what the demographics of your health issues and everything are. And then you go to the county level, that spreads it out even more. So with emphasis on moving things forward, I think we have to put more emphasis on our own house, I guess is the way to put it, instead of putting more weight on the city and the county numbers. Everybody knows in the room here, I guess, that the city's running the day camp programs, and that has students already in school with whether it's instructors or aides or whatever. So there are a certain number, even though it's a smaller number of students in a lot of our buildings already. So to expand on that, especially at the elementary level, I know there's risks to putting our children back into school. I realize that. But going back to my opening statement, if you don't try to do something, nothing is ever going to happen. And myself, I would like to see some type of a transition back into the phase 2, whether it starts a couple weeks before Christmas with the elementary kids, to see how the numbers really come out when you go on in a face-to-face metric again. And I think when we did it the first time, we see the numbers went up, and I don't think anybody in the room here panicked, but everyone wanted to make sure that the right decision was made. But now we've backed off into the virtual for 3 or 4 weeks, and not that it's time to go back 100% tomorrow, but I guess you've got to look back and see what we learned from the first 2 weeks in school and try to get the kids back in and learn from the stuff that didn't work, move forward again for a couple weeks before the Christmas break. And I would no doubt that there's going to be some more glitches and a few more mistakes and a few things that got to be corrected, but that goes back to the opening statement. If you don't try different stuff, you're never going to find a perfect answer in any of this ever. There's never going to be the perfect answer, but every time you go back into school, you're going to find different things that work, different things that you tried didn't work, so you get rid of those, and sooner or later you're going to find something that everybody can live with, and it might not be a perfect scenario, but you're going to find something that everybody's going to be able to live with. And I did suggest to Dan a couple of weeks ago something that where it relates to the high school and middle school level to, I guess, cut down the rolling average of quarantines. And my suggestion, and I don't know if there's any merit to it at all, but would be to try something along the line of 2 weeks in school, followed by a week of virtual. That way, your rolling average of quarantines doesn't blow out of proportion, because even if you have people out on quarantine, they'd be out on quarantine with a week of virtual. So instead of being out for full 2 weeks of regular school, they might be out for 4 days or 3 days or maybe even a week. And then you'd be right back in. The same goes with staff. But I'd like to see us try at least to transition some of our grade schools back in, especially when there was some of them, when we tried this the first time, that had very low instances and very low quarantine levels. We had 1 or 2 schools that didn't have any. So, I mean, it's something that, and that goes back to every time you try it, you take out the stuff that doesn't work, you stick with the stuff that does work. Sooner or later, you get a plan that does work. But we've got to keep trying different stuff, or you'll never get to that point. I guess that's all I've got to say.
So that, Mark, I kind of considering what you're saying there, I like to start with the elementary student and make a motion to have face-to-face learning effective November 16th using the individual school dashboard. So we don't flip-flop anymore. We don't close the school district anymore. If we have a quarantine, for example, we have 3 school, let's just say in 5th grade at Shepherd Hills, for example, and they have 3 classes. And one of the classes, one of the teachers or 1 or 2 students, God forbid, become positive or quarantine or whatever, or staffing, like Dan was saying. We close the class. We don't close, or we close the class, excuse me, right? Or if the school has a big outbreak, or we don't have enough subs in that school, for example, Shepherd Hills. Sorry, I'm not picking on Shepherd Hills, it's just on my mind here, but then we close down Shepherd Hills for 2 weeks, but we don't close down the whole district. I go prior of what Andy said. We had, and I forgot the numbers, Andy, but I apologize. We had 297 people, but when we looked at that, the dashboard, when we were open and we were hybrid and elementary was fully in, the elementaries were actually doing pretty well. And it's funny, we've been closed for 2.5 weeks, possibly 3 weeks, because we had a couple of days off. And the burden rate still goes up. So school is not the only factor, obviously, on this. So with this motion, I'd like to recommend with that motion what Dan said is the parents who want to stay home because they might have, immune systems or just nervousness of obviously, and I totally respect that, what's going on with the COVID situation in the city of Oak Creek and parts of Joint Franklin, then let's utilize that iPad and let them have the right to stay home. But the parents that want their kids to go in school, let them go to school. I'm really concerned about the social emotional issues for these kids. A couple of the people that were here this morning, or excuse me, this evening, have been here for multiple times. And I've been getting emails and calls from other parents, including my own kids, that the emotional and social issues are increasing so bad. And it's nothing against these teachers because they're working their tails off. And thank you for all hard you are working, every one of you. But we have to, I agree with Mark, we got to move this rock up a hill. And these elementaries, you know, I think of like, and I apologize, Darren, but I think of the words that you were saying, and actually, Mark, you said it personally with your daughter, Darren, and Mark, I think it was your granddaughter. If I'm wrong, I apologize. But struggling to get an iPad, it took 4 days to figure out a mute button. It's a horrible experience. And unless you have kids in this district, you have no idea when they're by 11:30, 12 o'clock, and they're sitting there playing video games because they're done with class, you know, done teaching already. I'm sorry, but these kids need to be in school. Now, I do understand there's this safety issue that we got to follow by. I understand, but I like these elementary students. I'm recommending to make that motion. And so, is there a second?
Are you recommending make that motion with the site-based dashboards that Dan had explained earlier?
Correct.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, discussion. I'll go right down the line. Please be respectful. Mark, you can start.
Frank, we've had a couple of requests over the last couple of meetings that we let people kind of discuss as they kind of want to versus the forced around the circle.
Yep. So anybody wants to talk about it?
I've got one little thing to add about some of the things I talked about before. My oldest daughter works poison control in the city of Milwaukee. She's been there for about 8 years. And I asked her if she could get me some figures. This relates to the mental health, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, and everything else that's going on because of the COVID thing here. Last year, for the whole year, they had 1.6 million calls. This year, as of October 1st, 2.4 million calls. So that tells you what the real toll is with what's going on out in the neighborhoods here, whether it's in Oak Creek or Franklin or South Milwaukee or Milwaukee, the whole state of Wisconsin, because she covers the whole state of Wisconsin. So that should tell you how serious this really is. And it begs to the fact, I guess, I know we're only one little school district in the whole state, but again, if you don't try pushing that rock up the hill, like Frank said, you know, we're never going to get anywhere. You got to keep trying stuff till we find something that works.
I do have additional comments on that. And I'm just starting with elementary. Obviously, I want to comment about middle school and high school also. But working parents are struggling. Elementary students are struggling with virtual, and I said emotionally and socially. Elementary teachers reached out to me that virtually is very hard, and they want to see their students. Special ed is in person, and it's going well. I have talked to multiple special ed parents. Oak Creek camps, I know we're maxed at 30. I know we have a couple, obviously, that I think you said so many numbers, Dan, but that's going well. Salvation Army is open. St. Matthews is open, and Grace Lutheran is open. Now, Darcy's not on the line, but I did ask her that question, but she answered it, that they're still open. So Franklin High School, I know, was told that it's closed, and 2 of the elementary, but it's for 2 weeks. Muskego, Franklin, Cudahy is still open. Today, South Milwaukee just announced they're going hybrid. Starting, if I'm correct on this, November 16th. Unfortunately, it may be sounded, but elementaries schools are really childcare for our parents. It's a facility. Another factor is that in this city, surrounding cities, we can't accept any more children. I've been hearing about this every day. Our Oak Creek camp is filled. So what do these parents do with that work? 5 days a week, 40 hours. Our Oak Creek and Franklin families are going elsewhere for daycare and schooling. I had parents that reached out to me just today saying they're moving to Muskego, Whitnall, McGuanago. That hurts me. I'm concerned about the mental social issues which is arising every day. We understand that we're going to have closures. We're going to have closures. We're going to have quarantines. But we don't have to close the district. That is why, again, I'm starting with the elementaries and we can keep having those conversations. I like the dashboard because it is our footprints are in those buildings, not disrespecting the burden rate. I'm not disrespecting the positivity rate. But when we were open, I looked at those dashboard numbers. Yeah, we had it. And trust me, I want all the numbers to be 0. But my big concern is these kids are behind. And then I look at our proficiency. I worry about our test scores. You know, I think about the high school. I worry about these ACTs that they're coming up. These seniors and juniors are fighting for scholarships. It's really hard to do that virtually. How does my daughter, who's in biology, how do you do a lab over virtually? It's not a great experience. So
Can we try to focus this on the motion?
yeah, that is the motion. So
High school and junior high is not.
Yeah, I know, but this is part of what I'm just saying. So we're playing sports, thank God. We have extracurriculums, thank God. Because what are we going to do with these? If we keep them virtual, they're going to be in a box. These elementary kids are going to be in a box all year. And now we're going into winter. And so it gets even worse. So what do these kids do in the winter? So that's why I'm obviously a fan of starting in face-to-face, utilizing the dashboard, but which Dan created. So thank you, Dan, for that. And but using the iPad, so that's the parents that don't want to come back to school, they want their kids back to in person. Utilize that, but the parents that do want them, again, repeating myself, then they should be able to come in.
All right, so the motion on the floor, Frank, could you repeat it for us, please?
I'd like to move to return our elementary students to face-to-face learning effective November 16th and utilize the individual school data dashboard for those schools to determine the phase of instructions. What I mean is also the addition of using the iPad for that parents who choose to keep their parents or the kids at home have the ability to do so. And the parents that want their children to attend school have the abilities also.
And that'd be giving the district the right to do what they have to do on that site-based dashboard to move the staff around and get the school, keep it running.
As best we could, Darren.
Yep, that's all I'm asking. Okay. I'll second that motion.
I would like to make a comment.
Yeah, discussion, go ahead.
Yeah. My concern with that is that my biggest concern is that would mean we would be going against the recommendations of the health department. And these are the experts. And I don't think with our burden rate at 1075, I don't feel comfortable at this point in time. And based on information that we got, that it could, and based on the numbers that we even saw today was 110, I believe it was. And that's, I think, our highest that we've had so far in Oak Creek. So I don't feel comfortable. I'm even concerned that our burden rate is going to go even higher. Darcy said that she is recommending that people stay within their families. I understand that there are schools that have decided to not go with that. Whether they're smaller, and that's the reason why, I don't know. That's their issue, not mine. So I don't agree with that. And I think when we talked about some of these other things before, we with our burden rate before, we said things weren't so bad in the schools, and I agree with that, but our burden rate was much lower. So I'm just worried that we're going to take and come into school, start back to school, and within a very short period of time, we're going to be closing. And so then our kids are going to go flip-flop back to, parts of them are going to have to flip-flop back to virtual learning. The common theme I have heard from pretty much all sides. I've heard it from teachers, I've heard it from parents, even the parents that say they want their kids back in school at no matter what, is they want consistency for their kids. So I don't feel that at this time we could have that. We couldn't have that for that consistency for kids. I feel like we're going to be playing the thing. Even I've talked to families that are in Franklin, and their kids, even though they've been open, a lot of their schools, they've had to be quarantined, so their kids are flip-flopping back and forth. So I mean, it's a lousy thing all the way around. I do like the new dashboard. I would be fine with that. I would totally agree with that. So those are my basis. Thank you.
Well, Cheryl, too, regardless of what happens with any vote, we'll keep working on the dashboard, and bringing you back iterations to look at.
Yeah, I'd like to ask, sorry, just a question about what are you proposing then would be the deciding factor to close a school? If you're going to do it school by school and starting with the elementary, what there's nothing in your motion that talked about what would close it.
Well, Dan already talked about that.
Dan already talked about it. So Dan has, if Dan says, if I'm wrong, Dan, please tell me. So if Shepherd Hills doesn't have enough staff, we're notified saying we're going to have to shut down Shepherd Hills for 10 to 14 days, just like a normal quarantine. And then but the rest of the school is open, the district wise.
Okay. Well, you just didn't clarify that in your motion, so I just wanted to make sure.
Oh, that's why he already said it. So I just assumed that's why I used the iPad.
So earlier in the meeting, like when I was describing this dashboard, I wanted to give the board like in studying other districts' site-based dashboards and thinking about what operationally would be required. What I described before is a staffing-based dashboard. Right. That's kind of what you see in other places that have done it that way. So the decisions would all hinge on whether or not we could maintain safety standards. So for example, like if Forest Ridge, for example, if this was to happen, they may not be able to open on the day Frank prescribed just based on their current state. Like we'd have to tonight or 6 o'clock tomorrow morning, immediately begin the calculus of figuring out how this would work and communicating all of this for the rest of this week for Monday the 16th.
In the case that we did have that scenario, wouldn't it be kind of a switch flip? I mean, it wouldn't be something that would change slowly over time necessarily. You'd either have the staff or you wouldn't, right? So it's not like a color coding thing that we'd be able to watch and say, okay, well, maybe next week we're going to have to close, because you just never know.
Yeah, no, it would not be slow and gradual. It would be immediate and like right now, right?
And
like
then in the case that a school had to close because of staffing, there would be no camp alternative.
No.
There would be school is closed, everybody goes home. You're going to learn virtual for 2 weeks. I hope you have a scenario set up for you to cover this at a moment's notice for the rest of the school year.
Right. Well, because we couldn't because we couldn't use any of those staff to run any camps. We'd be using every single person we had spread out across the district, redeployed on a daily basis. Like that's what would have to happen.
But all due respect, Hill Creek Camp is only 30 people. It's not really doing much.
300.
But it's not enough to cover. We have a waiting list from here to across the street.
No, I didn't say. I'm just saying.
Oh, I know, but then normal life is everybody's quarantined, right? And so everybody's quarantined. I get a call and I go to work one day and I'm all of a sudden I'm positive, or I was next to someone that's COVID. I'm going to be quarantined for 14 days.
Frank, we have to be able to talk about it.
I know. I'm just explaining it.
Well.
I just think the point that Leah's making is that the notice would be very short. Which
Yes.
we all have to be very realistic about that. That's the case. You'd have less than 24 hours notice, probably less than 12.
I would equate Leah's scenario to us waiting for a snow day, but without having a forecast.
Right.
And all of a sudden it just happens.
But it's a 2-week snow day.
Yeah. But it's a 2-week snow day. But I'm meaning the timing of notice is immediate, but without a prediction coming.
I want to one other quick thing that piggybacks off what Cheryl said earlier, which my concern with this is also the consistency that's required for effective learning environments. So one of the things that we've heard repeatedly from, as Cheryl said, from everyone, but specifically from teachers, is that the most important thing for them to have an effective relationship with their student is to have some consistency in the learning model. And one of the things that they've expressed is that that the potential of that disruptive flip-flop of in-person back to out-of-person, while it's not guaranteed that that would happen, it might not happen for some classes. I think we have to keep in mind that the data that we have so far shows us a consistent sharpening spike trajectory in the risk that will happen. Since the 3rd week of September, the burden rate has increased 140% every week. So we have to assume that it's probably going to increase 140% for next week as well. And what I'm just saying is the risk is still growing. I saw a statement from some parents in Franklin. She said, "My son was scheduled to go back in person this Monday after having his 3rd quarantine for being a close contact to another student. He's missed 6 weeks of school since the school year started. My daughter is finishing up her 2nd quarantine. That's 4 weeks of missed classes for being a close contact. Neither of them have ever been positive." So we're talking about kids who they just go to school. They go to school, they get a couple days in school, they get marked as a close contact, they get sent home to quarantine for a couple weeks, they go back to school for a couple days, they get sent home for 2 weeks. And that has to be really stressful for both students and teachers who are trying to provide a consistent learning environment. And while I agree wholeheartedly that we are going to have to figure something out for elementary students, especially before 350. I'm not married to 350, but I think we need to figure out when we can do this idea that I think is a good one. I have a couple of slight modifications I would suggest, but overall on board. I just think that we should do it when we have some confidence that we can maintain it with some control. I don't want to feel like I'm throwing a bag in the wind and watching it blow around and hoping it doesn't hit the ground. I'd rather wait until the wind dies down a little bit and I can set the bag down on the ground and go, it'll stay there for a few minutes. So that's kind of where I'm at. I love the idea. I'm dedicated to getting elementary kids in as soon as we can do so and feel like it might actually work out for a while. And I'd like to just wait until we see this sharpening spike take a turn.
Can I follow up a little bit? Just sorry to interrupt. Go ahead, Janie. Go ahead. I'll wait.
Like normal, I have a bunch of notes scribbled, which are in no specific order and probably are going to sound all over the board. I kind of wanted to just do what sounded really good, what maybe I didn't agree with, and maybe what I still kind of want to see tweaked. I think kind of similar to Leah, I like the idea of giving parents a choice again. I think a lot of parents felt like at one point, before the school year started, we had some choices and we made the decision to remove those choices. I like going back to a model where if you are comfortable, great. And if you are not, you're not, and you can make that choice for your family. I as well realize I can't be married to 350 forever, or I don't think we will have kids ever back in school. But at the same time, I feel like it's gone up and it's gone up and it's gone up and it's gone up. And so to say at 4 something we were going to pull kids out of school, and now it's 1,075 and I should send back. I as well would like to see at least that we've rounded a corner and are maybe moving back in the other direction, even if it's not back down to 350. I think from a contact tracing perspective, I don't know if it was said out loud, but talking about rather than who in your classroom were you closest to, shutting down an entire classroom if someone tests positive. So they're kind of all together or all at home, at least some consistency, in the group that they're with. Besides the dashboard, just with staffing, I guess I would like to also look at some type of a school dashboard for percent positivity. If you have enough teachers available, but you have 75% of your school positive with COVID, and I know that's, you have to kind of look at what the positivity there is as well, even if you have enough staff. I'd like something else with the school dashboard. I think the date, not only for me because we haven't kind of turned a corner, seems too soon. I also think if we're going to get a message out to families to give it some thought, make a decision, get back to the district, give teachers some advance notice for this is how many you might have in class, this is how many will be at home, and how are you going to do that? I don't think we could do that by next Monday. I think families may need to, or looking at, is there a commitment that families make so that teachers don't have a different number of students in person and at home every single week? And my last point being teachers with a big question mark. I don't ever want to speak for anyone. Not every teacher feels the same way. Not every parent feels the same way. But I think most of us got a survey today that had gone out to teachers, and there was like 30 out of hundreds that said they were comfortable in being face-to-face with students right now. And again, that's not going to be a deciding factor, but it's a lot to ask of teachers as well. And I want to make sure that they can appropriately teach kids at home and teach kids in person and give both groups the attention that they deserve, so that one group's not feeling like they're getting a different level of education. And these conversations have to happen quickly, and we can't spend weeks and weeks and weeks trying to figure out what that looks like. But I feel like there needs to be a little more time to determine, kind of what that looks like. I feel like the teachers are the one group in all of this then that wouldn't have as much of a say. We would give families an opportunity to choose how do we, and can we then give teachers some opportunity? So that's my long list of rambling.
I can piggyback off of that, Jane, because your comment about, and I think Frank did actually mention the idea that a class would go, like if there was a positive test, that the class would quarantine together. I want to clarify that just a little bit, because I was able to, Dan was kind enough to send me the scenario guidance for schools and staff. It's a table of that I think Bridget probably lives by, breathes it, hopefully with a mask on. And it lays out what happens if there's a positive case with a student, what happens if there's a positive case with staff, close contact student, close contact staff, and it goes on and on. Lots of things. I would amend, or I don't want to make an official amendment yet. I just want to throw out there that this document could be edited slightly for this proposal that I think we're all kind of kicking around here for elementary, to go back full 5 days, in which 1A and 1B, which is there is a positive case, would among a staff or students, would be kind of folded together, so that if a teacher of a classroom of elementary students tests positive, it's understood that the class is the close contacts and not a contact traced 6-foot assessment of who was in the front of the class and who was in the back of the class, and then so that there's just an understanding that close contact of a student or teacher when they were in school means the whole class cohort, including aides in the room, whoever was in the room that day. And then the action steps for those 2 steps could be folded into or combined essentially, so that you always do the same thing, whether it's a student or staff, so that you're capturing the whole class. And this would be a lot more clear if you all had this document, which
it's linked in the situation report for people who want to know what Leah's talking about. Okay. It's a very granular document we use at central office to figure out who's all the many different scenarios that we've encountered with COVID. So it's pretty detailed. Yep.
So there's a document we could edit should we move forward with the style of running our elementary schools specifically. It doesn't work as well at the higher levels due to the cohorting, but
I'll note too that if you add this as a standing item going forward, like we can continue to discuss exactly how that would evolve too. So
I have talked to teachers and a principal from another school that offer this to parents to have that option. And it has become a logistical nightmare. I will tell you that having these teachers trying to do both virtual and in person at the same time puts an added stress on those teachers. And, we're concerned about the teachers, we're concerned about the parents and the students. I get that, but I think we're setting them up for failure by allowing that if we do allow them to go back in person in elementary, I think offering them that option of staying home, I really think we need to seriously think about that, because that it could be a logistic nightmare for the teachers.
I think, Amy, logistically, it's going to be really serious. The only reason we shared it with you tonight is in case the board made substantial modifications like this. The feeling was there's a lot of people who have made life decisions based on prior board votes, right? And if the board, for example, voted to return full face-to-face for every kid in the district next week, Monday, we'd need to have an alternative solution available for the people who would take issue with that choice, right? So logistically, it would be very challenging, but it's all we had. Like that district you describe or other districts around the state, it's the only thing they have to offer when changes like this would be made quickly and people would have to respond to them. So your point's well taken, and we're clear-eyed about how hard it will be to support.
They told me very clearly that in hindsight, had they known what they know now, they would have never offered it at the beginning of the school year.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree, Amy, that I think it will be very, very difficult, but without some other concession, I struggle with saying, we said 350 at one point and we're at 1075. And again, I don't have to be married to 350, but
we anticipated, to your point, like just in our team
it's a give and
discussions.
take. If I give up this, then I'm taking this,
In our team discussions, we figured that if the board did anything that exceeded that 350 line, there are people who, the regional health officer came in and said 350, right? So anything in excess of 350, we wanted to have something to offer, right? That's the one thing we had to offer, right? Because we figured there'd be plenty of folks who aren't comfortable until it falls within the range that the health director gave us. So that was just what we came up with.
Yeah. So I just want to make, excuse me a second, Leah. So I'm just saying is you disagree that if the whole class was quarantined, you said it's going to be hard on the teacher.
No, not if the whole class is quarantined. You were talking about offering an option for students to be able to stay home if the parent wants to have them stay home rather than going back in.
Because that came from Dan.
So hang on, let me clarify, just so we're all calmly explaining and talking about exactly the same thing, right? So when we were in hybrid for those couple of weeks, there were plenty of kids throughout the district who were quarantined for periods of time. What we did is we allowed, that kid had to continue to learn, right? So you set up an iPad station in the classroom, right? We did this in some rooms, right? Where a kid was at home learning and the iPad was up in the room. Like, it's not the same, it's not ideal, but it allowed the kid to continue to learn without the teacher having to provide two completely different platforms of instruction. So we did it on a relatively small scale for those 3 weeks. So what Frank proposed, as I understand it, would be basically anybody who wants to take advantage of that option would have to notify us in the next 3 or 4 days or something like that, that's what they were planning to do before the 16th. And that may very well amount to between 0 and several hundred or 1,000 people. So we'd have to figure that out.
One thing I'd like to suggest, if we're going to go that route, is that we bake into our decision some guidelines for that. I mean, just open-ended, parents can keep their kids home if they're not comfortable. Well, what does that mean? Like, what does that mean for, I mean, I you know, theoretically, I love the idea, right? Like, people, the more flexibility we can provide families in this crazy time, the better. But at the same time, back to that whole, like, how do we create learning environments that actually are efficient and effective? I am very concerned about what Amy is bringing up in terms of the chaos that might create for a teacher, for a classroom, for a student. For, you know, what about that student who's whose parents are comfortable for a couple weeks and then they're not, and then they are? Like, how do we create a framework that we can all kind of agree to ahead of time? And I've thought about that a little bit, and I think I'd suggest that we have people commit to a quarter.
I agree. Some type of commitment so the teachers know what they're prepared, they can expect on a daily, weekly basis. So
a couple of different ways we can go about this, right?
Yeah.
There's a very intense deadline in the motion right now, right? That's driving a lot of this discussion, right? So, like, if the day is the 16th, right, we better have this figured out, because it's going to have to be I'm going to have to communicate this message tonight. Right. So if that's the way the vote goes, that gives a lot less time for the board to kind of, like, a quarter, whatever, that kind of thing. We're going to have to make some operational decisions basically immediately the second this meeting wraps. The members of the team that are still here are going to have to retire to another office and figure out how to communicate this message tonight and how it's going to work in the days that follow. And a quarter is one thing, but then you have the eventuality that the burden could fall, right? So there have to be some trip lines too. We have to figure out how it's going to be communicated to staff, the staff input piece, right? And there are people who will change their minds as this moves forward, right? So there's a bunch of factors at play here. And your point about how to operationalize this conceptually very good idea, well taken, right? Because the district is a very large entity with thousands of people who are deeply affected by our choices. Like, it takes a minute to implement things like this.
Right.
Dan, I understand the deadline, the 16th, is a tough one. The 23rd would bring us up to Thanksgiving, give us probably, 2 days in, maybe 3. The 30th would probably be ideal, technically.
Well, and remember too, Darren, that you guys have another board meeting on the 23rd, right? So there's time to talk and discuss. And I mean, if there's a motion on the floor, obviously.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm with that motion.
I know I'm summarizing for myself. I'm sorry. So that'll have to be voted on. And if the motion passes, that creates one set of challenges for me and the team to figure out, and we'll do our best with it, right? Otherwise, like, I hear a desire for this to be a standing item, and I would anticipate bringing back on the 23rd more details related to the dashboard, more operational considerations for how this would go. Plus, we would have another couple of checks of community burden to see if, like, we've peaked or we've plateaued or we're just exponentially climbing. right? Because I would imagine it would matter to the board if the burden was substantially up on the 23rd from where it is today. Maybe not, but I would think people would care if it went up.
Yeah, it's just gravely concerning to hear that the health department can't even keep up with the contact tracing.
Right.
I mean, so that means how many people are actually out there that we don't even know, that aren't even counted in the numbers that should be quarantining, are not because they're not aware of it. I mean, that scares the heck out of me.
And it was also stated that if we do go back, then that responsibility then comes back to the district, and they were pretty tight and kind of, sounds like barely hanging on before, when our burden rate was a whole lot lower. So I'm very, very concerned about that.
I think Darren brings up a good point too. For me personally, I just think communication to staff, communication to family, decisions that are made. A week is a really short time frame. If you looked even at 2 weeks, I think why do something where then you have 2 days of school and then families are off for 5 days?
And I'm fine.
And off having family gatherings.
Yeah. There's a lot of good pieces in this, Frank. I appreciate
I totally agree with that. So I'm fine with, like what Darren said, the 23rd or the 30th. It's just getting these kids into school.
Basically, just to give the administration and the educators, the teachers, more advance notice. Frank, I like the 16th. I'm ready to get them back in school. Also, I see a lot of other stuff going out around in this state. So, a lot of people out there shopping and doing all their other things, blah, 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 blah. But we're holding them back from school. And the people that want to go to school, let them come into school. The ones that don't, they can join in through a Zoom class or however it is. But administration, I leave that up to them, because they're doing a great job the way they're doing it now. The educators are doing a great job with all their virtual learning. So I applaud everybody here. I applaud everybody in this room. But it's time, like you guys are saying, push that rock. Let's just budget at least a little bit. If it's a date we need to come up with, let's come up with a date then. I like the 16th, but I'm open to 23rd or 30th to give administration and staff time to get it all rolling.
I agree.
I guess there's still a few pieces to me. Like, I'm obviously better with giving some more time, but I also feel like there's a few pieces that I feel like I need an answer to, or what it will look like to completely commit to something, as well. I don't know what the mechanism is to, I don't want to wait until just the 23rd to have the next discussion. I understand as a board, you can't just continue to meet and not have, open sessions. What's the best way to continue this conversation from now until the 23rd? Because
Jane, I see some direction here, right? I see a desire from the board to get closer on what site-based dashboards look like for the schools, right? There's been substantial consideration on that, right? And there also seems to be substantial desire to work towards returning elementary kids with some options and parameters for families who aren't comfortable for that. Right. So those are decisions that affect several thousand people. Right. The board has adopted criteria in a couple of votes that have laid out some pretty firm parameters that this is a departure from. And that's going to take some time to plan and prepare for. Right. And to the points that a couple other board members have made, we don't know if we're in the middle of a spike, at the end of a spike, or we don't really know where we are right now. Right. So it'll take a few minutes. There's a lot of desire from the board to talk about the most important issue facing the district whenever we are together, right? We have an impending holiday. Like, there's a bunch of different things coming together at once. I think plenty of people have noted that they see people going about their lives. I don't think we should expect the holiday to be the end of our challenges with COVID necessarily, right? So we have a bunch of stuff that we are working on, right? We're coming back in a couple of weeks to talk about it again. I mean, you can attach a deadline, but I would think the board would want to talk about that again, given whatever community health numbers come up. Like, I'm struggling here to articulate all the various points that everybody in this room has made here and kind of bring it together. And I realize that there's tremendous pressure and gravity to the decisions you're all making. I just want to make sure we're thoughtfully coming together around this, because I'm hearing a lot more unity in this room than we've had in some prior discussions on these subjects. I just want to make sure everybody's on the same page and we're doing it in a cautious and responsible way. So
I guess maybe I'd feel more comfortable committing to a date when we had some more of the details. Like you said, that if it's something that administration works on over the next 2 weeks, and in that point we've got some additional data from the health department as far as burden, that
I think that's what he's saying, Jade.
Yeah,
I think what he's saying is that we could potentially allow the district to organize some materials and concepts and operational plans around the things we've discussed here today, and we can have a more detailed conversation reviewing those things in writing instead of as concepts that were floating to each other, and actually vote on something that's on paper that has and plan and have a little more time to work out the timing so that we're not rushing anyone into something that they're not ready to do successfully.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's why we should probably have a special meeting next Monday on the 16th then, instead of waiting 2 weeks. Because you wait 2 weeks to get it going. Now you wait another week or two to get the parents involved and everybody involved. Now you're another month out again. So you're past the 30th.
Right. But I think it probably even takes longer than a week to get some of this stuff together.
Well, we can at least get more information.
They're still having to do all the things they do just to get the education we have. So I'm comfortable with waiting till the 23rd to have this discussion, like Leah said, with a little bit more teeth. But I don't want to attach a date for return yet till I have some more of that data.
Can I put in a couple 2 cents?
Sure.
I let Jane skip ahead of me, and then everyone skipped ahead of me. So I've been saving up. I've been scratching notes all night too, just so you know. But to Cheryl's point a while ago, where you didn't think it was the right time, and you still kind of touched on that again. I'm of the opinion that we might be coming up on the best time to try getting the kids back in school at the elementary level, especially because you've got 2 vacations coming up in the next 6 to 8 weeks. You got Thanksgiving break and you've got Christmas break. So if we put the elementary kids back in class, whether it's for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, gives Dan and the administration staff here time to see, again, like I said before, what's working, what isn't working. You can tweak the plan during the break, come back and drop some stuff that's not working out at all, add a few things that might help the plan or whatever we decide to do. So I think we're kind of in a unique spot here, I guess is the better way to put it, because after the Christmas break, then if you haven't had time to tweak anything we put in place, you're in school for 2 months, and kind of whatever happens. You got to do it on the fly. This way, it gives everybody some break time to figure out if the stuff we did decide to do is going to work, things to take out, things to put back in. So I think we're coming up on a good time to try to get the kids back in school and see if we can get something that's not going to be perfect, but it's going to work. Because I think that's what everybody in the room wants. Everyone would like to see a perfect plan, but we're never going to have one. We got to find something that's going to work. And it's going to be kind of a trial and error thing for a while. And I think everyone has to realize that. And we can't just keep bouncing around and keep waiting and waiting and waiting, because the longer you wait, the worse it is for the kids and worse it is for the families too. So, and I go back to my original statement. If you don't try something, you're not ever going to make any progress. So you have to be willing to try.
I would be interested to see, I mean, as long as we're throwing it out there, what it would look like district-wide and not just looking at elementary. I mean, if we're going to offer this option for elementary, why wouldn't we offer it to middle school and high school too?
Well, I was kind of thinking, excuse me, I don't know who I bumped into.
Go ahead, talk, Mark.
I'm sorry, Mark. I just have to say, like, I think you need to think what I just think that I think you know the answer to that already, right? Which is, what is the outcome of opening the high school at a time when the community burden rate is what it is right now, right? What is the foreseeable result of that? Right. And I don't have a crystal ball, right? But I think there's a lot of COVID in the community right now. And given our discussion about contact tracing and what we know about how we cohort students, the highest probability for success is your elementary students. And tell me I'm wrong if I'm wrong. I'd happy to be wrong on this subject, right? But I think if you have 20 some elementary kids in a classroom and a number of them stay home because the board has reversed its prior position on burden rates and they choose to stay home because that's what they desire now, and we're going to attempt to support it technologically despite your earlier point. I think that compounds as the kids get older, right? And you see what you see at a lot of comprehensive high schools throughout the region, where you get a lot of kids and a lot of teachers on quarantine, and that's where we find ourselves. Maybe not, but I think that's the reason why some people in the room have proposed we start with elementary, where we have the greatest probability of success.
I would love to be there at some point, Amy, but I do agree that I think we need to start somewhere, and I think the elementary area is the easiest based on cohorts, not moving classes, and to Mark's point, is there learning from that, and can we pivot to a model that looks similar at the other two? But I think we've got to start somewhere at a bite and kind of go from there.
Excuse me a second, Dan. Kind of concluded from what Amy was saying, though, if that iPad process that you were saying at the high school level, and we're doing a hybrid model, our classrooms would be actually a lot smaller, because a lot more people would probably want to stay home if that's to choose, but the ones that want to go in, they can go in. I'm just saying the classroom size at the middle school and the high school would be a lot smaller with that process that Amy was talking about, utilizing the iPad process that you were saying on a hybrid model in the beginning.
I think that if we could support it at the elementary school, the probability of being able to support it in several hundred more classrooms would increase. And given that we've used it in a very limited basis with kids who were quarantined during a 3-week period of time, is very different than it being something that we're using in every single classroom in a district. It's just a very different thing. Right? I don't want to see you do something that collapses in on itself immediately, right? That said, we will work to implement whatever vision the board wants to bring forward, but that has some inherent challenges in it. It might be, to Mark's earlier point, right? You might want to see how it works with the group where we have had the most success already and where we've observed the most success throughout the region and state.
So I'd be willing, obviously, to redo my motion to the 23rd to the 30th on the elementary level. No, I know it wasn't. I'm saying I would be willing to change it to start amended to the 23rd or the 30th. If you guys are willing.
To my, I was trying to sum up before, like if you alternatively would like to direct the team to bring you an updated dashboard and an updated implementation plan for consideration on the 23rd, that's an option that I'd heard batted around the room too.
Yeah, I'm more comfortable with that. I'm not comfortable with setting a date for going back until we have some information concrete in front of us that we can look at, not this conceptual stuff that's out there. I want to be able to look at something and like talk about it before we set a date to come back.
Right. Me too.
So on the 23rd, hypothetically, if you all agree with the site-based dashboards throughout the district for elementary, you're willing to start on the 30th then? I just want to make sure that's clear.
No, the answer is no.
I don't know. I would have to, I guess I'd want to know how fast they could turn it around. I'd want to know what our burden rate is. So for myself, I can't commit to a date at this time until I see what the district is proposing and to see what our burden rate is at that time.
Leave your motion the way it is, Frank.
Any other discussion? Okay, we'll take a vote. Roll call. Jane?
Not with the 16th.
Okay.
No.
Cheryl?
I dissent.
Okay. Darren?
Yes.
Amy?
No.
Leah?
No.
Mark?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. So, Matt, if we change it to a different motion, obviously using a date.
I'd like to make a motion that we allow the district to provide us with a written report of their plan based on our discussions tonight at our next meeting. And we can discuss the possibility of a motion to return at that time. I don't even know if we really need a motion for that, but that's where I'd like to see us head.
That's just a request.
Or either
Yeah.
that, or make a motion to put this on the next on this and every other agenda, so that we can have a discussion, so we can plan, so we can talk.
So for a start, Leah's original motion, right? I just want to make sure I got this written down, right? It's hard when everyone's talking. Direct administration to provide a written report based on tonight's discussion at our November 23rd meeting for future consideration. Okay.
Any other discussion?
There's a motion
yeah.
legally. Like, I don't really know that we need to vote on it. I just wanted to like formalize my suggestion.
Request. Thank you, Leah.
I'm really not, I'm clear, I guess, but so if we get a report from Dan on the 23rd and some other thing turns up with COVID by then, whether it's negative or positive, or whether it's a burden rate, so there's still no guarantee that some of the people in the room here are willing to put our kids back in school. Because it seems to me that everyone just wants to keep the discussion going, which is a good thing. When does the discussion end, and when do we take some action? That's what I want to know, because we can talk and talk and talk. We can waste another 5 or 10 meetings, and not that it's not a serious thing to be talking about, but sooner or later, we're going to have to decide if we're going to move forward or if we're going to just keep talking.
But I think we said that. I think we all agreed that that discussion on the 23rd could potentially lead to opening schools as soon as the 30th in the elementary.
I mean, I think all I can guarantee is I'm comfortable in making a decision on the 23rd when I have something about, all the things we talked about tonight really put into a plan.
Well, if that's the case, then it should appear on the agenda as an action item again. Correct?
No, correct, Mark. Yeah. The way I understood it, and please, can I just speak without a lot of other people talking at once? Okay. The way I understood it was we come back on the 23rd. I noticed it just like I noticed tonight as an action item, and we have some reports and the updated dashboard, basically like Leah said, to reflect the conversation all of you have had. The team can go back and listen to this. It's 9:21 right now. We can listen to this discussion and figure out where everybody was, bring it back forward as an action item.
Yeah, so I was under the impression if it's going to come back as a discussion item, we're just going to talk about it and no action will be taken again until the numbers or whatever get to where everyone likes them, and I'd like it to be an action item. If it comes back, it's got to be an action item. So we have a definite date where we know when we're going to try sending the kids to school or not. Because if we come back the 23rd beside the 30th or the 8th or whatever, that's why I'd like to see it as an action item. So,
but Dan, do you need 2 weeks to put it all together, or could you put it together within this week to have a special meeting on the 16th? Just asking. I don't want to pull your hair out. I know I don't want to pull your hair out, but
Darren, I'll do whatever I'm directed to do, and the team will work however hard they have to work to do it. It's just like the board together, considering all these different things they've talked about, like what's practical and reasonable, what makes the most sense for all of us. Like we'll continue to do whatever we can to move whatever mountains in front of us.
It sounds like you have some kind of site-based dashboard for the schools almost ready, but you just haven't implemented them. Well, I seen that one, but
Darren,
that's not broken
Darren-
down to like he's saying, with having the teachers and the staff coming in. If someone goes out or sick or missing, they want to see all this in writing, basically.
Right, they want to see it all in writing.
I
Like,
understand
what I did earlier in the evening was conceptualize what you see on a bunch of other districts that have site-based dashboards that did site-based instead of district-wide, like we did.
So we're going to give you basically, because the girls, well, I'm just going to say it because it's true. They want to sit here till the 23rd and wait till the next meeting instead of coming in on the 16th. Next Monday as a special meeting. Because I'm open for a special meeting. The more we talk about it, instead of going 2 weeks with nothing to the community, I don't think that's fair to them.
We're not going with nothing. We're giving the district time to develop a thoughtful process and spend the time that it needs to be done. So
I understand that.
There was also a little bit of discussion about people still having concerns about what the health department had shared and the current state of the burden rate. And I noted 2 or 3 people who said something about like waiting to see where we were in the spike, whether it was the end or the beginning or what. So I think it's more than just the time needed to flip the switch, communicate, flush out the plan, bring something forward. I think there's a little bit of trepidation based on like the amount of COVID in the community too. So I think it's a couple of factors.
Agreed.
Okay.
And Dan, all due respect to Darren's comments, I think he was just trying to be respectful in the time about.
No,
getting
of course.
everything ready.
Of course he was.
So that's why we asked about the special meeting, which I understand, agree.
I know you guys are pulling your hair out now the way it is. Everyone is. The parents are. You are. Administration, teachers. I understand that. You know, this is about the kids and everyone, all in one for the city of Oak Creek. And the sooner we can try to attempt to get at least elementary to start in, I think it's a win-win for everybody. But to keep, I'm not going to say dragging it on, but waiting 2 weeks every time. Sometimes we don't even bring it up at a meeting. That's kind of frustrating because this is what I hear from other residents and people that have kids in school. You didn't even talk about it. Well, that wasn't the time it was talked about. It wasn't on the agenda. It was, So I just like the community to be up there. I know they can look at the website and all that stuff, but they actually want to see us in this room, basically the war room, and freaking hashing it out and trying to get something accomplished that's positive to try to move forward. You know what I'm saying? Because sitting at home with these kids, for a lot of parents that are, like Frank mentioned earlier, K4, kindergarten, first, second, those kids really don't have a clue on to run these Chromebooks or iPads, with the mute button. That's exactly what it was. You got to go outside and take pictures of stuff and do stuff for activities for class. That's tough when you got 2 kids at home, maybe even 3, and they're all doing something different for parents. And that's where the stress comes in on the parents. And that's why all this mental health and everything's playing into it that you guys don't know about truly, because these parents are at home pulling their hair out, going 3 different directions. They have 3 kids in elementary or less. And then high school parents, they're pulling their hair out because their kids are laying in bed in their pajamas doing their schoolwork, and it's not a good environment for them to learn anything, or they doze off or whatever they do, or take their thing and they block their camera view so the teacher don't know what they're doing. So I just want to try to do something for these children of the city and these families that get these kids back in school. And I understand how dangerous COVID is. I work at the VA hospital, so I take precaution every day. And if people take precaution every day, do what they're told, I think it'd be okay. I can't talk for the 35,000, 37,000 people in Oak Creek, but something happened where they got COVID. Something went wrong. They weren't listening to CDC. I don't know what they were doing, but something happened for that. But there's a majority of the people out there that want to get their kids back in school. Thank you guys for letting me vent.
Dan, on that meeting, I know obviously we're going to still talk about the elementary, but I still want to talk about the middle school and high school also.
No, of course, Frank, you can bring up whatever you want.
But
So did Leah have a motion on the table?
There's really no motion. She just requested something.
Not a.
I can't hear you.
All right. It's not really a motion.
I don't know that in Robert's Rules of Order a suggestion for a topic for the next meeting requires a motion. So I would not fight against the the process to get my motion seconded. I think I've made my suggestion clear, and if we need a motion to move forward out of this conversation, then by all means, feel free to second.
I will second that, just because I think it would be good for us to have it on record that that we want to keep moving and that we want to keep this as an agenda item for the foreseeable future. So I second it. I can't hear you. Sorry.
Okay, so just to sum
I
up,
think you're changing things.
just to sum up, can I just try to keep us organized here? So Leah moved and then discussed at length, directed administration to provide a written report based on the discussion tonight at our November 23rd meeting for future consideration. Cheryl, would you like to second that motion?
I would like to second that motion.
Okay.
Any discussion? Okay, roll call. Jane,
Yes.
Cheryl,
Yes.
Darren,
Yes.
Amy,
Yes.
Leah,
Yes.
Mark.
Yep.
The only thing I want to say before I make my vote, I just wish, I do agree with Darren that I wish it was earlier so we can get these kids in quicker before the 23rd. So I'll say yes. Any other questions? Okay, motion to adjourn.
Well, hold on. Do we need to do anything to request that discussions around school reopening and processes be a standing item, or has it already been decided?
No, and I mean, like, you're certainly revisiting it at our next scheduled meeting. So if you feel that's necessary to add at that meeting, you can do it at that time, or just the discussion reflected that the board definitely wants to discuss the most important issue in the district at subsequent board meetings, as long as that endures. So I don't think you need a motion. I know everyone agrees to that. So it's nice that we have two kind of unanimous consensus items here tonight. I know this is like high emotion and a lot of tension and stuff, but we're moving forward. And it's unfortunate that like our numbers continue to climb in Oak Creek. I don't think any of you anticipated that continuing to happen, but I still think the group, I want to applaud the group for being so collaborative and productive tonight. And let's see where we get.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Sir Niglia moves to adjourn.
Malat, second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Thank you for attending. Have a good night.